Welcome, everyone. You're now watching a live IELTS prep session, and this one might just change how you approach your exam. Grab a notebook and a pen because we'll be going through grammar tips, vocabulary boosters, writing, tricks, and real strategies that can push you toward band 7+ and beyond. Whether your test is tomorrow or next month, this session will give you the clarity and confidence you need. Before we dive in, make sure to like this stream, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any more content like this.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're laser focused on something many of you are tackling, or probably will be soon, the IELTS reading test. We've got some solid resources here, mainly drawing from an IELTS prep guide, and, well, our goal is really to cut through the noise.
Yeah, kind of sifts through it all.
Exactly. We want to give you the essential insights, the practical strategies, so you feel not just ready, but, genuinely confident walking into that exam.
That's right. Think of this as us doing the legwork, pulling out what will truly make a difference in how you approach it, how you perform on the IELTS reading test. We're aiming for those sort of aha moments.
Those light bulb moments, yeah.
Exactly. Things that can shift your perspective and hopefully your score too.
Okay, so let's get straight to it then. This prep guide we've got, it lays out some of the biggest challenges students run into. And it seems like time and time again, the clock is the real enemy here.
Absolutely. The guide, it doesn't really mince words. It basically states that time is the biggest problem. It even says many students don't manage to finish the test.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you think about it, 40 questions, just 60 minutes. And that includes getting your answers onto the answer sheet. That pressure is, well, it's very real, something you have to prepare for.
And it's not just about being a speed reader, is it? The texts themselves can be pretty tough.
Oh, definitely.
The guide mentions lengthy texts with difficult vocabulary. Plus, you've got those specific question types that honestly can feel like little puzzles. Things like paragraph headings or that infamous true-false not given.
Those ones. Yeah, they demand a particular kind of careful reading, don't they? It's not just understanding the words on the page.
Right.
It's grasping the subtle connections between ideas, figuring out what's actually stated versus what's just implied or, not even mentioned at all. These are definitely places where people can lose precious time if they haven't got the right strategies down.
Okay, let's circle back to those difficult vocabulary words you mentioned. The guide is pretty, emphatic about this. There's a tip in there that really jumps out. It says, IELTS reading is really a test of your vocabulary. That's quite a direct statement, wouldn't you say?
It is, and honestly, it's a really crucial point for anyone listening to take to heart. Having a strong vocabulary, it's not just about knowing definitions off the top of your head.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing synonyms, understanding different shades of meaning, and ultimately really comprehending the nuances in the text you'll face. If you can unlock the vocabulary, you're going to unlock a much, much better understanding of the questions and where to find those answers.
And while the guide does give you techniques, ways to navigate the test more efficiently, it also makes it really clear there's no quick fix, no substitute for actually building your word power. It says the best way to improve your IELTS reading score is by doing a lot of reading and vocabulary work. So it sounds like consistent effort is really what counts, not just last-minute cramming of techniques.
That's exactly right. Think of the test-taking strategies like tools in your toolbox. They're useful, but vocabulary, that's the foundation your entire understanding is built on. The stronger that foundation, the better you can actually use those tools.
Makes sense. So when you're faced with these potentially long, dense texts, where do you even start? The guide suggests focusing on finding the main ideas first. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. The ability to quickly pinpoint the central theme of a paragraph, often it's in a topic sentence, but not always. That's a real game changer for your reading speed and your comprehension.
Right.
The guide even has exercises specifically for sharpening that skill. If you can get the gist, the main point of each paragraph quickly, you'll have a much clearer mental map of the whole passage before you get bogged down in detail.
Okay, so you've got the general lay of the land. What's the next step? The guide talks about using keywords.
Keywords, yeah. These are usually the important nouns and verbs in a question. They act like little signposts pointing you to the right area in the text.
Yeah.
So, by spotting these key words in both the questions and the passage, you can seriously narrow down the parts of the text you need to read really carefully. It's about being strategic, focusing your attention where it matters most.
Like being a detective, looking for specific clues. And the guide also stresses recognizing synonyms and, similar ways of saying the same thing, which makes perfect sense because the test isn't always going to use the exact same words in the passage, and the question, is it?
Precisely. IELTS very often tests your ability to understand paraphrasing. You'll see an idea expressed one way in the question and then maybe slightly differently using synonyms or different sentence structures in the text.
Right.
Being able to spot those connections, those alternative ways of phrasing things, that's crucial for linking the question to the right bit of information. And again, the guide offers exercises specifically designed to help you practice that skill.
Okay, so we've got the big picture with main ideas. We're zeroing in with keywords and synonyms. Now, let's get into the real nitty-gritty, those specific question types. Maybe start with multiple choice. That seems pretty standard.
Yeah, multiple choice. For these, the guide recommends a really targeted approach. Use those keywords we just discussed to find the relevant bit of the text.
Okay.
Once you think you're in the right spot, read that section very carefully. And here's a key tip. Look at all the options before you choose. Don't just grab the first one that seems okay.
Ah, good point.
Sometimes the information confirming the correct answer might actually appear a bit later in the text than the info related to the incorrect options, the distractors.
That's a great reminder not to just jump at the first thing that looks familiar. Okay, what about those tricky identifying information questions? The true, false, not given, or yes, not given types. These can feel like real mind games sometimes.
They really can. The guide stresses that with these, you have to be super precise about what the text actually says. Don't bring in your own knowledge. Don't make assumptions.
Stick to the script, basically.
Exactly. Focus only on whether the statement directly matches or contradicts the information presented. A very common mistake is students marking something as false when the information simply isn't there. It's not given. It's a subtle distinction, but one you really need to practice getting right.
Right. It's strictly about what's on the page or what isn't. Okay, then we have matching information questions where you link specific details back to the paragraph they came from.
Yeah, this type really tests your scanning skills. You're looking for specific things, maybe examples, reasons, descriptions, comparisons, that kind of thing. And the guide points out a couple things. You might not need to find a match for every single paragraph, and sometimes one paragraph might contain information that matches more than one of the statements or questions. So read carefully.
Okay, good to know. And what about sentence completion? The guide seems quite strict about the rules for these.
Absolutely. For sentence completion, the first thing is pay very close attention to the word limit in the instructions. If it says no more than 2 words, stick to that religiously.
Don't add extra words.
No.
Oh.
And also, make sure the words you pull from the text fit grammatically and logically into the gap in the sentence. It's not just about finding relevant words. They have to work in the sentence structure provided.
So accuracy and following instructions are key there. And it's a similar kind of deal with summary, note, table, or flowchart completion tasks, right? Understanding details and structure.
Yeah, exactly. These tasks check if you understand both the main ideas and the supporting details within a specific part of the text. When you're filling in those gaps, think about the type of word needed. Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective?
Okay.
And again, if you're taking words directly from the passage, you have to respect that word limit.
Got it. And for short answer questions, the guide emphasizes using a limited number of words from the text and being super careful with copying and spelling. Sounds straightforward, but maybe easy to mess up.
It can be, yeah. These questions are usually about recalling specific facts. So locate the info, transfer it accurately. Even tiny spelling mistakes can cost you marks, so double check.
Right. Okay, finally, let's touch on paragraph headings. The guide mentions that when you have headings that look quite similar, that's where it gets particularly challenging.
Precisely. That's a classic IELTS trick. When you see headings that seem almost the same, resist the urge to just skim quickly and pick one.
What should you do instead?
You really need to read the entire paragraph quite thoroughly to grasp its overall theme, its main point. Then choose the heading that best sums up the whole paragraph, not just one sentence or one part of it.
So it's a real mix. Then sometimes you need to skim strategically. Other times you need that deep, careful reading depending on the question.
That's the essence of it, yes. Adapting your reading style.
Okay, shifting gears just a bit. The guide also talks about building vocabulary, not just through reading passively, but more actively.
Yes, and one really effective technique it recommends is keeping a dedicated vocabulary notebook.
Like actually writing things down.
Yeah, old school but effective. When you find a new word, jot it down. Note it's part of speech, noun, verb, whatever. Find some synonyms if you can. And crucially, write an example sentence showing how it's used in context. That active engagement really helps cement it in your memory.
That active approach definitely sounds more powerful than just, say, highlighting words in a book. The guide also suggests experimenting a bit with different learning
It
methods.
does, because, what works brilliantly for one person might not click for someone else.
True.
So the guide encourages you to try different things. Maybe writing words out repeatedly helps you, or saying them aloud, using flashcards, digital or paper, or even trying to actively use the new words in your own speaking and writing practice. The key is to find the methods that resonate with you and then stick with them consistently.
But what happens, inevitably, when you're in the actual test, under pressure, and you hit words you just don't know, panic can set in pretty fast, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a common feeling. And the guide offers some really valuable advice here. It says basically, sometimes you can still answer the question correctly, even if you don't understand every single word.
How?
Try to infer the meaning from the context around it. Look at the other words in the sentence. Think about the general idea of the paragraph. This is especially useful if you're just trying to identify, say, an example of something.
Yeah.
Or grasp the overall point being made. Don't let one unfamiliar word completely derail you. Guess intelligently based on the context.
That's actually really reassuring advice. Don't get stuck on one word. Okay, let's come back to what the guide said right at the start was the biggest challenge. Time management. It sounds like this is something you need to be thinking about constantly.
Absolutely. It really bears repeating. 40 questions, 60 minutes flat. And that 60 minutes has to cover the time you need to transfer all your answers carefully onto the official answer sheet.
There's no extra time given for that transfer.
No extra time at all. And importantly, any mistakes in spelling or grammar on your answer sheet will be penalized. So you absolutely need to practice under timed conditions to get a feel for the right pacing.
And just to help manage that time, it's probably useful to know what the test itself actually looks like, the structure.
Definitely. The guide points out you'll face a mix of question types, could be multiple choice, true, false, not given, matching headings, sentence completion, summaries, all sorts of things.
Okay.
And these can appear in any of the 3 reading passages. You won't necessarily see every single possible question type in any one test, but you need to be prepared for any of them. Familiarizing yourself with all the formats beforehand saves time and cuts down on anxiety on the day.
Okay, so to kind of bring this all together, our deep dive into this IELTS reading prep material has really highlighted some crucial things for listeners to focus on.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, vocabulary is absolutely foundational. Your consistent effort in expanding your vocabulary, especially through active reading, that's going to be your biggest long-term advantage, no doubt about it.
Secondly, mastering those effective reading strategies like quickly finding main ideas, using keywords strategically that's going to let you navigate the texts much more efficiently. It's about working smarter, not just harder.
Thirdly, really taking the time to understand the specific demands, the nuances, and the best approaches for each different question type. That will equip you to tackle whatever the test throws at you with more confidence and accuracy.
And finally, that point about time management. It isn't just something to think about at the end. It needs to be baked into your preparation and your strategy from the beginning. Practice timing yourself.
Definitely. So as you continue your IELTS prep, really make a conscious effort to build that vocabulary consistently and actively practice applying these reading techniques we've discussed. Don't just read theory, apply it to lots of different English reading materials.
And maybe here's something to really chew on as we wrap up. While getting to grips with the test techniques is, definitely valuable, remember that genuinely expanding your overall English language skills through lots of consistent, varied reading, that's the most powerful and lasting way to boost not just your IELTS writing score, but your overall language ability.
That's a great point.
So maybe consider this. How could actively engaging with diverse English texts, stuff you actually find interesting perhaps, beyond just the practice tests, how could that lead to some unexpected jumps in your understanding and your confidence? Something to think about.
If this tip helped you, give this stream a quick like so I know you're learning something valuable. If you're just joining, welcome. We've covered some key grammar so far, but don't worry, there's more to come. Like the EBU video, and if you're enjoying the stream, send it in the chat. This would be a good moment to take a screenshot or write this down. It could be the thing that gets you band 7+.
Okay, so here's something interesting to start us off. You've got these vital community places, libraries, right? Often really struggling for cash.
Yeah, the funding issue is stark.
And then on the flip side, you have Esperanto, this language someone actually invented for global understanding, and like a million people speak it.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. And that contrast, it kind of sets the stage perfectly for what we're diving into today based on the materials you shared.
Exactly.
Because it's such a mix. We're going from, how libraries work to language learning tricks, economic forces, migration, even dung beetles.
Yeah, don't forget the dung beetles. So for you listening, that's the plan. We've got this collection of stuff from new IELTS tips, fertilizer history, you name it. And our mission basically is to pull out the really interesting bits, the surprising connections, and just, well, make sense of it all together, give you the highlights.
A shortcut through this diverse knowledge.
Exactly. So let's start with libraries, a cornerstone, you could say.
Right. And your sources, they point pretty clearly to one major modern threat: funding. Simple as that, almost.
But it's not just about keeping the lights on, is it? It's the tech.
Precisely. You need more sophisticated hardware. You need people who know how to run it, manage digital resources. That all costs money, and those costs are going up.
And it's like a double whammy because the skills people need to use the library are changing too, right? With all the digital stuff.
Absolutely. So users need new skills, and the librarians, the resource professionals, they need evolving expertise to help. It's pressure from both ends.
Okay. Now, shifting gears completely. Esperanto, this international language. It sounds a bit niche, maybe?
You might think so, but 1 million speakers internationally, that's...
Yeah.
Well, it's not insignificant.
Right.
And its real strength seems to be bridging gaps, especially in, specialized fields or communities.
How's it used? Like, practically?
Well, the sources mention personal context, sure, but also publications, radio broadcasts. Apparently, Radio Beijing has a really popular Esperanto program.
Oh, Radio Beijing. Okay.
Yeah. Read worldwide. And it's spread beyond Europe. Brazil, Japan are mentioned, but China seems quite significant.
How so?
It's actually taught in some universities there and used for translating scientific and technical stuff.
So it's not just a hobby thing?
No, not at all. There's this monthly magazine from China, El Popular, all in Esperanto, read globally. It shows it really works for sharing info, especially technical info, across borders.
It's kind of amazing an artificial language doing that. Tapping into that desire to connect.
Exactly, even without being an official national language anywhere. Okay, so from constructed languages connecting people.
To bigger forces moving people, international economics and migration. This isn't new, is it? The sources point that out.
Not at all. There are clear historical examples, the U.S. needing workers during World War II, so they made an agreement with Mexico for temporary migrants.
Right, for railroads and farms.
Exactly. And then after the war, you had Northwestern Europe rebuilding, bringing in guest workers from Southern Europe, Turkey, North Africa.
Driven by the need for labor.
Absolutely. And then again, in the 70s and 80s, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, booming with oil money, brought in huge numbers of workers, mainly from Asia, to build cities.
It just shows how economics has always been a massive driver for people moving around the globe. A good lens for looking at today, too.
Definitely.
Now, something very practical for you, our listener, especially if you're learning English or prepping for tests, your sources get into IELTS strategies. Vocabulary seems key.
Oh, yeah. One source basically calls the reading test a vocabulary test, which might be a bit strong, but it highlights the importance.
So what's the advice? Just learn more words.
Well, yes, but strategically. Like making lists of words you don't know, keeping a notebook, noting the part of speech, synonyms, active learning.
Right, not just recognizing them.
Exactly. But interestingly, it also says you don't always need to know every single word.
Using context.
Yeah, using context clues. The example given was the word obesity.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know it, but you can figure out the question anyway. And sometimes just making an educated guess is a valid strategy.
Okay, so it's test strategy as much as language knowledge.
Pretty much. And matching keywords in the question to similar words in the text, that's a core technique highlighted. Very practical stuff.
Related to language, there's also a bit about studying how kids learn language, right? Different approaches.
Yeah, linguistics versus psychology, looking at kids naturally or doing experiments. Each way gives different insights and has limits. Shows how complex language learning really is.
Okay, let's pivot to the planet, environmental issues, agriculture. Starts with the basics, the ozone layer.
Right, that protective shield against UV radiation, a fundamental point.
But then it gets complicated. Incentivizing farmers to be more environmentally friendly, it sounds like it sometimes means paying them not to grow things.
Sort of, yeah. Because the existing incentives might push them towards, say, high-yield crops that need lots of inputs. So greener practices need to compete economically. And there's interest in farmers using crop residues for fuel, like ethanol or biomass. It's cleaner than fossil fuels. But it often needs subsidies to actually compete on price, so policy is crucial.
And policy can cut both ways. The sources mention subsidies in poorer countries for pesticides, fertilizers, leading to problems.
Big problems. Overuse, pests becoming resistant, this chemical treadmill idea.
Right, where you need stronger and stronger chemicals.
Exactly. Plus harm to human health, pesticide poisoning stats are mentioned, and soil erosion. It's a cycle.
So well-meaning subsidies can backfire.
They can. Though on the flip side, the Uruguay round trade talks potentially reducing subsidies in rich countries could have environmental effects too, both good and bad, as production shifts globally. It's complex.
Which kind of leads into the history of fertilizers themselves. Big deal in the 19th century.
Huge deal for food production. You had scientists like Justus von Liebig figuring out nitrogen's importance, and Jean-Baptiste Boussingault realizing different plants need different amounts. Real breakthroughs.
But knowing it and selling it are different. Liebig's fertilizer business failed at first.
Yeah, even though it was cheaper than grano, which was the main thing then. Farmers didn't trust it, maybe. He actually had more success later with beef extract cubes.
Seriously?
Wow.
Okay. And then there was laws in Britain?
John Bennett laws. He did lots of experiments, patented superphosphate in 1842, the first big artificial manure, changed everything.
And his farm still exists?
The experimental plots, yeah. Rothamsted research shows the legacy.
Okay, now for a shift in tone. A really serious health issue. Secondhand smoke. The stats are pretty grim.
They really are.
Yeah.
Increased risk of death from heart disease, lung cancer for non-smokers living with smokers. And the risk depends on how much exposure.
And that UCSF study, it says secondhand smoke is worse for non-smokers. How does that work?
The idea is that a smoker's body adapts somewhat, develops some tolerance. A non-smoker's body doesn't have that, so the damage hits harder. It's a crucial point.
It's not just one bad thing in the smoke either, right?
No, multiple components, carbon monoxide, nicotine, loads of others, all doing harm.
And the sources mention criticism that some consultants downplayed the risks.
Yeah, and they cite this estimate of deaths from heart attacks just from passive smoking in the U.S. each year. Puts it up there as like the third biggest preventable cause of death.
Which leads to the argument for treating it like other major public health threats.
Exactly. Like illegal drugs or AIDS. The call is for smoke-free public spaces, basically, to protect everyone.
Okay, let's lighten things up slightly, though still fascinatingly complex.
Yeah.
Dung beetles.
Huh. Yes, the unsung heroes of dung disposal.
Who knew there were so many ways to deal with dung? French beetles, Spanish,
Yeah.
South African,
Yeah.
different methods.
Totally different. Some dig shallow tunnels right under the pat. Some make these deep, like sausage-shaped brood chambers.
And some roll it away in balls?
That's right, the classic image, ball rollers. But the key ecological point is the variety.
Why is variety important?
Because different species are active at different times of year or prefer different conditions. So having a mix of them, like the examples from Victoria, New South Wales show, means dung gets buried efficiently across seasons and climates.
Ah, so it's teamwork, in a way. Biodiversity doing its job.
Precisely. Shows how important even these overlooked creatures are for the ecosystem. Okay, back to human health, but from a wider angle.
The social determinants of health. That WHO statement from '86.
Yeah, it's powerful. It basically says health isn't just about not being sick or having doctors. It needs fundamental things.
Like what?
Peace, shelter, education, food, income, a stable ecosystem, sustainable resources, and social justice, equity. It's broad.
So creating health is much bigger than individual behavior or medical care.
Much bigger. We need to tackle stuff like poverty, pollution, unplanned urbanization, resource depletion, social alienation, poor working conditions. All that impacts health.
They all interact, don't they? Social, economic, and environmental factors.
Exactly. They're interdependent. You can't really separate them when you're looking at what makes a population healthy.
So the conclusion is, we need a socio-ecological approach.
That's the term, yeah. Focus strongly on the social, economic, and environmental contexts. Health promotion needs that broad view.
Right. Okay, and finally, back to you, our learner friend. More IELTS tips, covering all of the skills.
Yeah, lots of practical advice. For writing, answer everything. Don't get stuck on hard questions. Analyze your mistakes later.
Good tips. And listening.
Train your ears. Listen actively. Use recordings. Repeat stuff. It's different hearing a word than seeing it written.
True. And watch out for plurals, right? And spelling.
Definitely. Lowercase is okay, apparently, but missing an S for a plural could cost you a mark. And spelling needs to be spot on when you transfer answers. Oh, and listen for signpost words that guide the conversation.
Like a firstly, however, in conclusion, stuff like that.
Exactly. And remember, the test often has conversations between two people, so practice listening to dialogues. Podcasts are great for that. Real English.
Good plug for podcast.
Yeah.
What about speaking? Part 1 seems like general questions.
Yeah, topics like neighbors, hometown, reading, games, travel, phones, clothes, sports. Key advice: give reasons for your answers. Don't just say yes or no.
Makes sense. Part 2 is the one where you get a topic card.
Right, you get a minute to prep. Use it to jot down simple lists or key ideas for the main topic areas, usually describing an object, person, event, activity, place, or favorite thing, like a book or film.
But they don't judge your accent, but clarity matters.
Exactly. Clarity, speaking speed, word and sentence stress, intonation. That's what they listen for, not a specific accent.
And part 3 is more discussion.
Yeah, more abstract. Tips include asking yourself, why? Explaining alternatives, giving examples to make your answers longer and more detailed.
Okay. And writing. Task 2, the essay. You need opinions.
You need well-supported points, but there's no single correct opinion. It's about how you argue it.
And there are different question types.
Lots. To what extent? Discuss both views, advantages, disadvantages, cause-effect solutions, two-part questions. Knowing the type helps structure the answer.
The sources suggest a timing plan, too.
Yeah, like plan for a few minutes, write intro, body paragraphs, conclusion, then check for errors. Maybe 5 minutes planning, 5 minutes checking, 30 minutes writing.
And brainstorming ideas is important. The sources list loads of sample topics.
Everything from studying abroad to robots to childhood obesity to the purpose of schools. A huge range.
And for to what extent questions, you can have a strong view or a balanced one.
Right. You need to structure your body paragraphs logically. Use transition words to link ideas smoothly. That's coherence and cohesion, one of the marking criteria.
The sources give examples of intros, conclusions, body paragraphs.
Yeah, and lists of transition words for adding points, contrasting, showing cause-effect, giving examples, sequencing time. Very useful.
Plus full sample essays with examiner comments. That sounds really helpful.
Extremely helpful to see what different band scores look like in practice across tons of topics.
Okay, what about writing task 1? That's the graphs and charts one, right, for the academic test.
That's the one. Describe a visual graph, chart, table, map, process diagram. At least 150 words.
Key things to do.
Explain the main features, make comparisons where relevant. Crucially, no personal opinions, just report what you see.
And use the right language, like
Yeah.
describing changes.
Yeah, using the right vocabulary and tense, usually past tense if the data is from the past. Getting the number of, the amount of, the proportion of correct is important too.
What about percentages that aren't exact?
Use qualifiers.
Yes.
Just over, approximately, almost, nearly. And there are specific words for proportions, majorities, minorities.
And comparing things.
Use words like while or whereas. The sources give examples for all sorts of visuals processes like making bricks, diagrams like the water cycle,
Maps showing changes over time, like a town expanding.
tables comparing activities or ownership, bar charts for prices, line graphs for trends over time.
Pie charts showing proportions, like electricity generation. Lots of examples provided.
Yeah, it really covers the main types you might encounter.
Wow, okay. We've covered a lot of ground there. It really is amazing how you can start with libraries and Esperanto and end up talking about dung beetles, global economics, health policy, and IELTS essays.
It is quite the journey. But you see the threads, right? Communications, systems, human needs, environmental interactions, how we measure and describe the world.
Yeah, you do. And hopefully, for you listening, some specific things stood out. Maybe it's thinking about vocabulary differently now.
Or seeing health as more than just doctors and hospitals.
Right. Or understanding a bit more about those big historical forces shaping migration, or just appreciating the sheer variety of ways we analyze information, like in those IELTS tasks.
Absolutely.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. We talk about how international economics has historically driven migration. Thinking about today's world globalization, climate change, technology, what future migration trends do you see coming? What do you think will be the main drivers in the decades ahead?
That's a big question. Definitely food for thought.
Exactly. Something to ponder. We really hope this deep dive has sparked some ideas, maybe give you a fresh angle on a few things.
Hope you found it useful.
If this tip helped you, give this stream a quick like so I know you're learning something valuable. If you're just joining, welcome. We've covered some key grammar so far, but don't worry, there's more to come. Like the EBU video, and if you're enjoying the stream, send it in the chat. This would be a good moment to take a screenshot or write this down. It could be the thing that gets you band 7+.
Okay, that moment when you're facing the blank page, knowing you need to craft this really well-structured essay for IELTS writing task 2, to hit that band 7 or higher.
Yeah, it can feel like a real hurdle.
It really can. And look, you've shared some great resources with us, specifically focusing on Adam Smith's insights into this exact challenge. So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to cut through all that information and pull out the absolute crucial strategies, the things that can really make a difference.
Sort of like sifting through it all.
Exactly. To give everyone listening the essential toolkit for Task 2 success.
Right. We're going to be looking at, what makes a strong Task 2 response. Things like how to break down the different question types, the importance of good planning, which is huge, and how to actually build a coherent argument that, ticks all the boxes for those higher band scores.
Okay, let's dive right in then. You sit down for the test, Task 2. What's the basic setup?
Okay, so you get 60 minutes total for the whole writing test. Task 2, they recommend about 40 minutes for it.
40 minutes, okay.
And the target is an essay, at least 250 words. A really key thing to remember is who you're writing for.
Right, the audience.
Yeah, think of an educated general reader. Someone smart, but not necessarily a specialist in the topic. So you need a formal tone, definitely, but you don't need overly complex academic jargon,
Okay, formal but accessible. Makes sense. And what are they actually asking you to do in that essay? What's the main task?
Well, the questions usually revolve around a few core things. Arguing for an opinion, maybe discussing causes and effects, sometimes predicting future trends or suggesting solutions to problems.
Okay.
What's really interesting and important is that in most cases, you're actually expected to give your opinion, to take a clear stance.
So you can't just sit on the fence usually.
Not usually, no. The sources even suggest that bringing in relevant personal experience or examples can actually strengthen your points.
That's good to know. It helps make it less abstract, I suppose. What about the topics? Are we talking really niche academic subjects?
No, not at all, thankfully.
Yeah.
The topics are pretty general interest. Things like travel, education, current affairs, maybe health or technology, stuff most people would have some thoughts on.
So no specialist knowledge needed.
Nope. The main things are write incomplete sentences, and crucially, don't just copy phrases from the question prompt.
Why not?
Because those copied words won't count towards your 250-word minimum. It has to be your own writing.
Got it. Your own analysis, your own words. Okay, so moving on to tackling the task itself. What are some of the really core strategies that Adam Smith highlights?
Number one, without a doubt, is really, really understanding the question. Read it carefully, then probably read it again.
Sounds simple, but...
It is, but so many marks are lost just by slightly misinterpreting what's being asked. After that, it's all about prep.
Prep, meaning...
Meaning analyzing the topic properly, brainstorming ideas, and not just surface-level ones, deciding your position if it asks for one, and then, crucially, creating an essay plan. A roadmap.
A roadmap, I like that. Stops you just rambling.
Exactly. Always have a plan before you start writing the actual essay.
What about the timing? 40 minutes just flies by. Is there a suggested way to break that down?
Yeah, the source gives a pretty helpful suggestion. It's not rigid, but a good guide. About 10 minutes right at the start for that planning, for building your foundation.
5 minutes planning. But...
Then maybe 5 minutes for writing your introduction, about 20 minutes for the main body paragraphs, maybe split that 10 and 10 for 2 paragraphs.
Right.
And then leave about 5 minutes at the end for the conclusion and a quick check over.
10 planning, 5 intro, 20 body, 5 conclusion, and check. Okay, that feels manageable when you break it down like that.
It's a guideline, but yeah, it helps structure your time.
And what about just how it looks, paragraphs and things? Does that matter?
Yeah, the sources mention 2 common ways to format your paragraphs. You can either indent the first line of each new paragraph.
Like in a book.
Right. Or you can leave a blank line between paragraphs without indenting. The absolute key thing, though, is consistency. Pick one style and stick to it for the whole essay. Don't mix them up.
Right. Mixing looks messy. Consistency shows clear organization. Got it. Okay, let's talk question types. It sounds like task 2 isn't just one kind of question.
No, definitely not. The source breaks them down into a few main categories. You've got questions like, to what extent do you agree or disagree? That's a common one.
Okay, opinion-based.
Then there are discuss both views questions. Sometimes they add, give your own opinion to that.
Ah, okay. Bit more balanced.
Exactly. Then you have advantages and disadvantages questions, sometimes phrased as benefits and drawbacks. Also questions focusing on causes and effects or problems and solutions.
Right.
And finally, sometimes you get multiple questions or two-part questions where you have to address, well, two related things in your essay.
Wow, okay, quite a variety. Now, the tricky part seems to be knowing exactly when you need to give your own opinion. Can you clear that up?
Yeah, this is super important. For those to what extent questions or one's asking if something is a positive or negative development.
Yes.
Your opinion needs to be clear right from the start,
Yeah.
in the introduction, and you should restate it in the conclusion. Be consistent.
Intro and conclusion, got it. What about the others, like discuss both views?
Okay, for discuss both views and give your opinion. Or ones like, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages?
Right.
You absolutely have to cover both sides fairly, but you also must clearly state your own position on the matter, usually towards the end, maybe in the conclusion, or signaled earlier.
So discuss both, then state your view. What if it just says discuss both views, without the and give your opinion part?
Right, if it only asks you to discuss both views, or maybe what are the benefits and drawbacks? Technically, the main task is just to explore both sides objectively.
So no opinion needed there.
Well, here's the nuance. While you don't have to explicitly say, I think, presenting the arguments in a way that subtly leans towards one side, while still giving fair coverage to the other, can show higher-level thinking. And honestly, most discuss both views questions do add that "fey" and give your opinion clause. So, rule of thumb, read the entire question very, very carefully.
Okay. Always double check if your opinion is explicitly asked for. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
So once we've figured out the question type, we need ideas. Brainstorming. How do we do that effectively?
The source makes a really good point. Good ideas are fundamental for a high score. It's not just about language.
Right. Substance matters.
Exactly. So when brainstorming, try to look at the issue from different angles. The source used an example about should families using private schools still pay taxes for state schools?
Okay.
The brainstorming there leaned towards disagreeing. Ideas like, well, how would you even calculate the tax reduction fairly? Isn't it fundamentally unfair to disadvantage state schools? And don't we all benefit from good state schools?
Yeah, those are good points.
And notice how those ideas then get kind of grouped, like practical problems and fairness issues. Two main themes emerge.
Ah, so it's not just listing, it's grouping too.
Yeah, starting to structure. Try thinking about wider impacts, maybe long-term consequences, not just the obvious stuff. That often generates stronger arguments.
That's helpful, thinking wider. The source also had that study 'em abroad example, right? Listing pros and cons.
Exactly. Pros like, better universities, job prospects, broadening horizons. Cons like culture shock, language barrier, maybe homesickness. Brainstorming is casting the net wide. Then the planning stage is where you select the best fish and arrange them neatly.
Good analogy. Okay, so net cast, fish selected. How do we actually start writing? The introduction. What's the key there?
Keep it short and simple. That's the main advice. Maybe 2-3 sentences max.
Really? That short?
Yeah. It just needs to do two things. One, introduce the general topic of the question, paraphrase it, don't copy it. And two, give a short, general answer to the question. That includes your main opinion if one is required.
Set the scene, state your position.
Pretty much. It tells the examiner what the essay is about and where you're generally heading.
Can you give an example, like that community service one?
Sure. So, if the question is about mandatory community service for teens, a good intro might be something like, people are increasingly discussing whether teenagers should do unpaid work locally. I strongly believe that these kinds of programs offer major benefits for the students and the community.
Okay, yeah, clear topic, clear opinion, direct.
Exactly. Or for, say, computers replacing teachers. Technology is playing a bigger role in classrooms, that's clear. However, I don't agree that computers can entirely replace the role of a human teacher. Again, topic introduced, stance taken.
Makes sense. The source also mentioned strong versus balanced views. How does the intro change?
Right. If you have a really strong opinion, like in those examples, your intro can just state it clearly. You don't necessarily need to mention the opposing view right at the start.
Okay.
But if you're going for a more balanced argument, maybe you only partly agree or see significant points on both sides, then your intro should probably signal that.
How?
Using phrases like, while there are strong arguments for X, or This issue has both considerable advantages and disadvantages, something that prepares the reader for a discussion of different perspectives before you maybe lean one way later.
Got it. Signal your approach. Okay, intro done. Now the main part, the body paragraphs. How do we build those effectively?
Right, this is where those brainstormed ideas come in. First step is to prioritize them. Pick your strongest points for each paragraph, then arrange them logically.
Logically. How?
Well, so they flow naturally and build your argument. Then, the key is elaboration. Don't just state the idea, explain it, give reasons. Maybe a brief example, though keep it focused on the argument, not telling a long story.
Okay. Explain and support.
Exactly. And this is where transition words or linking devices are absolutely vital.
Ah, the glue that holds it together.
Precisely. They create that smooth flow, not just between sentences within a paragraph, but also, crucially, between paragraphs. They act like signposts for the reader.
Showing how idea B follows from idea A.
Yeah, showing the connection, the development of your argument. Things like, furthermore, however, on the other hand, as a result, for example.
Does the source give examples of different types?
It does, yeah. It helpfully categorizes them, like words for adding points, moreover, in addition. Words for contrast, nevertheless, conversely. Words for cause-effect, therefore, consequently. Comparison words, example words, words for summarizing. It's a good list to get familiar with.
That sounds really useful. Where do these transitions usually go, especially between paragraphs?
Often, the transition linking back or moving forward appears right at the start of the new paragraph, like another significant factor is, or however this view fails to consider. It signals the relationship to what came before and introduces the new point.
Okay, start the paragraph with the link. Got it. That categorized list sounds like gold dust. So, we've built the body. How do we wrap it all up? The conclusion.
Right. The conclusion. Similar to the intro, keep it concise. Its main job is to summarize and reinforce your position.
So no new ideas in the conclusion.
Definitely not. Don't introduce completely new arguments here. It's about synthesis. The source gives specific advice based on question type again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So to what extent? You basically restate your opinion from the introduction, but using different words. You might start with in conclusion or to sum up.
Reinforce the main message.
Exactly. For discuss both views and give your opinion. Your conclusion should briefly summarize the key arguments from both sides you discussed, and then very clearly state your own final opinion.
Summarize both. State your view clearly.
And for advantages and disadvantages, the conclusion needs to clearly state whether you think the pros outweigh the cons or the other way around, based on your body paragraphs.
Makes sense. A final judgment. Wasn't there a specific sentence structure mentioned for the discuss both views conclusions?
Ah, yes, the while or although sentence. It can be quite elegant.
How does that work?
So you might say something like, in conclusion, while argument X has some validity, I ultimately believe argument Y is more convincing because, or, although there are clear benefits to one side, the drawbacks associated with the other side seem more significant overall.
Ah, I see. It acknowledges the other side one last time before confirming your stance.
Exactly. It shows balance, but still gives a clear final position.
That's a neat trick. Okay, we've covered the whole essay structure. What about preparation besides just writing endless full essays? Any other tips from the source?
Yeah, definitely. Writing full essays under timed conditions is important, of course, but you can also break it down.
How so?
Practice just writing introductions for different questions, or focus just on crafting strong body paragraphs for specific topics. Maybe just practice conclusions. Small, focused tasks.
Less overwhelming, maybe.
Can be. Another great tip is to actively read about common IELTS topics. Environment, education, technology, etc. Not just to practice reading, but to gather ideas and vocabulary related to those themes.
Build your idea bank.
Exactly. And finally, just get into the habit of forming your own opinions on various current issues. Think about why you hold that view. That mental exercise helps enormously when you're faced with a Task 2 question under pressure.
That's really practical advice. Focus practice, build knowledge, and practice thinking critically. Okay, so let's try and recap this deep dive into Adam Smith's advice for Task 2.
Sure. We've really unpacked the structure, haven't we? 40 minutes, 250 words, formal but accessible style. We stressed how vital planning is that 10-minute investment up front.
The roadmap.
Yeah. And understanding the different question types and, crucially, when and how to weave in your own opinion based on the specific prompt.
Right, concepting the question fully.
Then we talked about effective brainstorming, going beyond the obvious grouping ideas. crafting those concise introductions that state the topic and your general stance.
Straight to the point.
Building logical body paragraphs with clear points, explanations, support, and those all-important transition words for flow.
The signposts.
And finally, writing conclusions that summarize, maybe restate your opinion using different words, and don't introduce new information.
Perfect. It feels like if listeners really internalize these points, they'll be much more confident tackling task 2.
I think so. Applying these insights should really help anyone aiming for that band 7 or higher. It gives you a framework, a process.
Absolutely.
And maybe a final thought for listeners. As you practice, really think about which of these question types you find toughest. Is it the discuss both views ones or the problem solution? Why do you find it tricky?
Good point. Identify your personal weak spot.
Yeah. Understanding why something is difficult is the first step to improving it. Focusing your practice there, using these strategies, that's how you'll really see progress.
If this tip helped you, give this stream a quick like so I know you're learning something valuable. If you're just joining, welcome. We've covered some key grammar so far, but don't worry, there's more to come. Like the EBU video, and if you're enjoying the stream, send it in the chat. This would be a good moment to take a screenshot or write this down. It could be the thing that gets you band 7+.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. This is where we take the information you need, the stuff you send us, and really get to the heart of it. We sift through it, pull out the key knowledge, the useful insights. Basically, we do the heavy lifting so you feel well-informed, fast.
And today, we're tackling something I know is on a lot of your minds. The IELTS speaking test. We've got excerpts here from IELTS Speaking by AdamSmith.pdf.
Right?
And our mission really is to distill the best strategies, the core advice from this guide. We want you walking into that test feeling, prepared, confident.
Exactly. We're going to focus on what the examiners are actually listening for. It's not always obvious.
No, it's not.
And we'll give you practical tips for each bit of the test. We know you're busy, you need to get this quickly, but properly understand it.
Aiming for those aha moments, without making your head spin.
Perfect. Let's dive in.
Okay, so the IELTS speaking test. It's pretty structured, actually. You've got 3 parts.
Few parts, okay.
Part 1 is the interview. Think general chat, familiar topics.
Like a warm-up.
Exactly. They hit part 2, the solo speech. They give you a cue card, a topic with some points, and you talk on your own for a bit.
Okay, the cue card part. Got it.
And finally, part 3. That's the discussion. It gets a bit more abstract, usually linked to your part 2 topic.
Right, deeper conversation. And how long does this all take?
The whole thing, usually around 11 to 14 minutes. Each part has its own sort of time slot within that.
Okay, 11 to 14 minutes. Now, I bet a lot of listeners are thinking, is one part, more important than the others? Where should I really focus my energy?
That's a really good question, and it's a bit nuanced. Officially, it's 1 score for the whole test. They don't score each part separately.
Okay, so it all blends together.
It does, but thinking about what each part does is useful. Part 1, the warm-up. It lets the examiner ease you in. Test basic fluency.
Makes sense. Get the nerves out.
Yeah, but you won't get a top score just by acing part 1. They need to see more. And actually, keeping answers concise in part 1 shows you could be efficient, which they like.
Okay, so short and sweet for part 1 is actually a good thing. What about part 2, the solo speech?
That's where they really get a sense of your ability to speak at length, organize your thoughts, keep going coherently. It forms a big part of their initial impression of your level.
So part 2 is pretty crucial for showing what you can do when speaking for longer. And part 3, the discussion.
Right, part 3. This is where you can really shine, honestly. It lets you show off your ability to handle more complex, abstract ideas, justify opinions.
So a good part 3 can really pull your score up.
Definitely. Even if part 2 wasn't perfect, smashing part 3 can make a big difference. It shows you can think and talk about trickier stuff.
Okay, that's really useful to understand the dynamic. Now, the scary bit.
Yeah.
What if you're sitting there and you just don't understand the question in any part? That must happen.
Oh, it does. And it's okay. There are ways to handle it. In part 1, the examiner can repeat the question if you ask.
How do you ask?
Just politely. Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? Simple as that. They can't explain it in part 1, but they can say it again.
Okay. And if I still don't get it?
Try your best. Say something related to the topic, maybe based on words you did catch. Then just try and move on mentally to the next one. Don't let it derail you.
Right. Don't get stuck. What about part 2 with the cue card?
Well, the question and the bullet points are written right there for you on the card. So because it's written, the examiner can't help you understand the words.
Ah, okay. So you're on your own with the card.
Pretty much. That 1-minute prep time is crucial for making sure you understand what you need to talk about.
Got it. And part 3, the discussion, can they help there?
Yes. In part 3, if you're stuck, the examiner can rephrase the question.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, you can ask, so, could you explain that question in a different way, please?
Ah.
It's a really useful tool to make sure you're answering what they actually mean.
That's brilliant. Knowing those options definitely lowers the panic potential.
Absolutely. And honestly, the big takeaway from the source material here is that the test is predictable in its format. Once you know the structure, know what to expect, you can prepare. And preparation is the key to confidence.
Okay, preparation, predictability. That makes it feel more manageable. So let's talk core strategies then. Things that work across all parts of the test. What are examiners fundamentally listening for?
Right, the big picture. There are a few key things. First, fluency. Can you speak reasonably smoothly without massive long pauses while you're searching for words?
Okay, keeping the flow going. Makes sense. What else?
Understanding and answering the actual question. Sounds obvious, right? But it's crucial. Answer directly. Don't go off on a tangent. Relevance is key.
Stay on topic. Got it. And vocabulary must be important too.
Hugely important. They want to see you have a good range. The source calls them smart words.
Smart words, like really complex ones.
Not necessarily super obscure words, no. It's more about using appropriate and varied language. Using the right word for the right situation, showing you have options, not just basic vocabulary.
Okay, precise and varied vocabulary, and the last main thing?
Grammar. Accuracy matters. Especially using tenses correctly, past, present, future. Good grammar helps you express your ideas clearly, especially the more complex ones.
Right. So fluency, answering the question, good vocab, accurate grammar, those are the pillars. Now, the guide gets specific about part 1, the interview. It mentions 5 simple rules. What are they?
Yeah, these are really handy for part 1. Rule 1. Keep answers pretty short. Aim for maybe 30 seconds, then stop confidently. Don't ramble.
Short, confident answers. Okay, rule 2.
Use full sentences. Even if it's a yes or no question, don't just say yes. Say, yes, I do because, or something like that. Expand slightly into a proper sentence.
Full sentences, check. Rule 3.
Try to use some words from the examiner's question in your answer. It shows you've understood and helps you stay relevant.
Echo the question a bit. Clever. Rule 4.
Give a reason, if you can. Briefly explain why you feel that way or why you do something. Adds a bit more substance.
Yeah, to because. Okay.
Right.
And the last one, rule 5.
If it is a yes-no question, make sure you actually say yes or no clearly at the start before you elaborate. Answer the question directly first.
Got it. So the 5 rules. Keep it short, full sentences, use their words, give a reason, answer yes, no directly. That's a solid plan for part 1. But what if they ask about something, I don't know, totally boring to me? Or something I know nothing about, like synchronized swimming?
Yeah, that happens. And the advice is simple. Just be honest.
Really? You don't have to pretend you love synchronized swimming?
Nope. It's totally fine to say you're not interested or don't know much about it. The key is how you say it. Be polite.
Okay, how would that sound?
Well, like the example in the guide, if they ask about dancing, you could say, actually, no, I don't really enjoy dancing. I'm not very musical, and honestly, I feel a bit awkward doing it.
Okay, just straightforward.
Or if it's about something you know nothing about, like, say, the future of folk music. You could say, to be honest, I'm afraid I don't really follow folk music, so I don't have much of an idea, but I suppose it will probably always have its fans.
So you admit you don't know, but maybe offer a tiny thought.
Exactly. It shows you can communicate even when you lack knowledge, which is still a skill.
Yeah.
It's better than making stuff up badly.
Right. Honesty is the best policy, even in IELTS. Okay, let's zoom in on part 1, then the interview. We know the rules. What else?
So part 1 is about 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 10 questions or so. And the topics are usually familiar, everyday things.
Like what?
Hobbies, family, friends, where you live, food, music, your studies, or work. Stuff you can generally talk about without too much specialized knowledge.
And we need to keep answers short, right? Around 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's the goal. Because the examiner has a list of topics to get through. Long, rambling answers just eat up time and don't really help. Concise is better here.
The guide had that example about home-cooked food versus restaurants, didn't it?
It did. Instead of a huge comparison, a good answer is like, oh, I definitely prefer home-cooked food. Mainly because I think it's healthier, you know what's going into it. And I actually quite enjoy cooking too.
Clear preference, a reason, maybe a little extra detail. then stop.
Exactly. That's the model for part 1.
And the guide lists loads of possible part 1 topics, too. It's quite a range.
It is. Things like neighbors, houses, numbers, hometown, friends, reading, study, walking, parks, maps, games.
Wow, okay. Travel, work, collecting, cooking, even laughing. Emails, clothes, toys, shopping, sports.
Yeah, all sorts. Communication, musical instruments, free time, family. The point isn't to memorize answers for all these.
Right.
It's more about just thinking about them a bit beforehand, getting some basic vocabulary ready in your head for these common areas. Just helps you feel less surprised on the day.
Makes sense. Just having some thoughts ready reduces the chance of freezing up. Okay, let's tackle part 2. The solo speech and that cue card. What's the process here?
Okay, part 2. You get the cue card with the topic and bullet points. Then you get exactly 1 minute to prepare.
1 minute. Feels like no time at all.
It flies by. Then you have to speak on the topic for 1 to 2 minutes. And after you finish, the examiner might ask 1 or 2 quick follow-up questions based on what you said.
How on earth do you use that 1 minute effectively?
Good question. The key advice is, don't try to write sentences. Just make a simple list. Keywords or short phrases for each bullet point on the card.
Bullet points for the bullet points. Got it.
Yeah. Focus on understanding the topic quickly, then spend most of the minute jotting down those key ideas. Don't worry about perfect grammar or spelling in your notes. Just get points down.
Fast notes, focus on ideas. What else?
Well, if the topic is similar to something you've practiced or thought about, definitely try to use those ideas. Adapt them.
Reuse ideas if possible. Smart.
And again, don't stress about grammar during the prep time.
Yep.
Focus on content and maybe some key vocabulary you want to try and use. And practice this. Practice making quick notes for different topics. It's a skill you can build.
Practicing the preparation part itself. That's good advice. So you've got your notes. How do you actually talk for like 2 whole minutes?
The simplest strategy is just keep talking until the examiner stops you. They'll let you know when the time's up.
Okay, don't stop early.
Right. And to structure it, follow the bullet points on the card. Address them in order. That gives you a ready-made structure.
Okay, follow their roadmap.
And then to fill the time, develop each point, even simple ones. If it asks who the person is, don't just give their name. Give their name, age, maybe what they look like, where they live, how you know them. Add details.
Flesh out each bullet point with specifics.
Exactly. And use real examples. Tell little stories if they fit. That makes it more natural and gives you more to say. Also, pay attention to your tenses. Describing a person might involve past memories, present facts, future hopes related to them.
Use examples, tell stories, watch the tenses. Okay. The guide also had 3 important tips just for part 2. What were they again?
Right. Tip 1, use that prep time well. Get those ideas and keywords down in English.
Okay. Tip 2.
Give real examples. Talk about your actual experiences and feelings. It sounds more authentic. And honestly, it's usually easier to talk about something real than something you're inventing on the spot. If you get stuck, a quick, real anecdote can get you going again.
Real examples are easier and better. Got it. Tip 3.
Don't obsess about perfect grammar while you're speaking in part 2. Focus on getting your ideas across clearly, using good vocabulary. Fluency and communication are more the priority in that 2-minute stretch.
Okay, prioritize flow and vocab over perfect grammar during the speech itself. What about eye contact? Do I need to stare at the examiner for 2 minutes?
Actually, no. The guide specifically says don't worry too much about eye contact in part 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You need to look at the cue card to follow the points and glance at your notes to remember your ideas. The examiner understands that. Focus on delivering a structured answer using the card and your notes.
That's a relief. Okay, good to know. And you mentioned adapting ideas.
Yeah.
Can you reuse stuff you prepared for other topics?
Definitely. Look for overlaps. If you prepared ideas about a favorite gadget, maybe you can adapt some of that if you get a card about a gift you received or something you bought recently. Be flexible.
Smart. Think connections. What about using those fancy-sounding phrases some people memorize, like, today I am going to talk about?
Yeah, the source advises against using those formulaic phrases.
Why is that?
Examiners can spot them a mile off. They sound unnatural, memorized, and often don't quite fit the specific question anyway. They're not impressed by them. Just answer the question directly and naturally.
Okay, avoid the memorized scripts. Be genuine. Now, the guide lists a ton of part 2 topics and sample answers. It's almost overwhelming.
It's a lot, but it shows the range. The key main topics it highlights are good starting points, though. Describing an object, a person, an event, an activity, a place, Or favorite thing, like a book or film.
Most questions fall into those buckets.
Yeah, a lot of them do. And seeing the specific examples, like describing a mobile phone or your father or Facebook or winter or planning to buy a camera,
Yeah.
it helps you see how those main topics play out.
And the sample answers give you a feel for the structure and detail needed.
Exactly. And the list goes on, right? A journey, a conversation, a school subject, a festival, furniture, something funny, an advert, a vehicle, a TV show, something that made you angry, a foreign culture, a childhood toy, a team project.
A wild animal, a modern building, a teenage experience, an interesting lesson, an artist, a garden, an old building, a market, a celebration, a school, a game, a local change, a prize, a happy event, a place to relax, a skill, something naughty.
A favorite book, film, music. It's vast,
Yeah.
but seeing the patterns helps. Many involve describing something or someone or talking about an experience. Preparing vocabulary and ideas around those core themes is efficient.
Yeah, it seems less about preparing for every single specific topic and more about building flexible ideas and language for common themes.
That's exactly it. Use the list to spark ideas, not to memorize scripts. Okay, shall we move to the final part? Part 3, the discussion.
Yes, part 3. What's the setup here?
So this follows part 2, lasts maybe 4 to 5 minutes, about 5 questions or so. It links to the part 2 topic but goes broader, more abstract. It's about expressing opinions, justifying them, analyzing things.
A discussion, but the examiner leads, and I do most of the talking.
Pretty much, yeah. They'll ask questions to push you to explore the topic more deeply.
And there are common types of questions in part 3.
There are. The guide highlights 3 common ones: comparing and contrasting things, giving your opinion directly, and imagining or speculating about situations, often the future.
Okay, compare, contrast, opinion, imagine. The guide used cities as an example.
It did, like comparing city versus rural life, or asking your opinion on improving cities, or asking you to imagine what cities will be like in 50 years. Recognizing the question type helps you structure your answer.
Right. And you mentioned tenses are especially important here.
Yes, definitely in part 3, because you're often comparing past and present, or talking about the future. Using tenses accurately really shows grammatical control when dealing with these more complex ideas.
Be mindful of tenses. Got it. Now, these answers need to be longer, more developed than part 1. How do you do that naturally?
Good question. The source suggests a few techniques. One is to keep asking yourself why. Dig deeper into your reasons.
Yeah.
Another is to explain alternatives, like if this wasn't the case then. Also, use specific examples to back up your points. Examples make abstract ideas much clearer.
Right. Examples again.
And using simple structures can help organize longer answers, like saying firstly, secondly, finally, or using an idea explain example pattern for each point you make.
Those structures sound really helpful for keeping it coherent. Can I use ideas for my part 2 prep here?
Absolutely. The guide strongly recommends it. The part 3 topic is related, so the vocabulary and ideas you prepared for part 2 are often very relevant. It's a great foundation.
Okay, so part 2 prep does double duty. Are there other suggested ways to structure part 3 answers?
Yeah, a few more. There's the it depends, approach acknowledging complexity, explaining different factors.
Yeah.
We mentioned firstly, secondly, finally. And another good one is explaining both sides of an argument before giving your own view. Shows balanced thinking.
Acknowledging complexity, structuring points, showing both sides. Good tools. And again, the guide has a massive list of part 3 example questions. Right?
Oh, yeah. It covers everything from the internet, politeness, status symbols, toys, technology at work, lessons, sports, wildlife, parties, leisure, transport, advice, community, history, competitions, river seas.
Wow. And general topics, too, like cities, weather, animals, computers, restaurants, celebrities, holidays, chores, study work, future plans, hobbies, food, success, design, sportsmen, TV, music, books, friends, travel. It's endless.
It really covers the gamut. And looking through them, you see the types of abstract thinking involved. How does X affect Y? What are the advantages or disadvantages? How has Z changed over time? What might happen in the future?
It's about practicing that kind of thinking and discussion in English.
Exactly. Not memorizing answers, but getting comfortable with discussing issues, speculating, justifying opinions.
Okay, but what if? What if they ask something and I genuinely have no clue? Like, zero idea. Part 3 seems harder to bluff.
Yeah, it can be trickier. The guide suggests 2 main paths if you're truly stumped. First, honesty again.
Just say, I don't know.
Pretty much, but explain why, briefly if you can.
Honestly, that's not something I've ever really thought about, know much about, because
Okay, and the second option.
make an educated guess. But say you're guessing. Well, I'm not really sure, but I would imagine that perhaps. Or if I had to guess, I'd say it shows you're still trying to engage.
Honesty or a flagged guess. Better than silence. Okay, last thing for part 3, the 3 simple tips.
Right. Final tips for the discussion. 1, be confident, or at least project confidence. Speak clearly, don't mumble.
Fake it till you make it a bit.
Sort of, yeah. 2, don't be afraid to disagree politely with the examiner's premise. Or offer a different view, just back it up with reasons. Okay, it's a discussion, not just agreement.
Exactly. And 3, speak naturally. Try to make it feel like a real conversation. Listen to the question. Give your genuine thoughts.
Confidence, willingness to disagree politely, and natural speech. Got it. The source also mentioned thinking of answers like a paragraph.
Yeah, like a mini essay structure almost. Main idea, explanation, support, maybe an example. That can help build a full logical answer.
Okay, that's a really helpful way to think about it. So let's pull this all together. We've dived into the IELTS speaking test based on this guide. We know the 3-part structure. We know examiners want fluency, relevance, good vocab, and accuracy.
Right.
Part 1. Follow the 5 simple rules, short, full sentences, use their words, give reasons, say yes, no.
Yep.
Part 2. Use the prep minute wisely for notes, follow the card, use real examples, add details, focus on flow over perfection, and use your notes card, don't stress eye contact. Part 3. Expect abstract discussion, use techniques like why, examples, and structures to give longer answers. Use your Part 2 knowledge. Handle don't know honestly or with guess. And be confident and natural.
You've got it. That's the core playbook distilled from this guide. These are the practical, actionable things that should help you, the learner, walk into that test feeling much more prepared and clear about what you need to do.
Absolutely. It feels much less mysterious now. So here's something to think about as you practice. Which of these techniques feels like it could make the biggest difference for you? How might really focusing on using those real-life examples and properly explaining your why actually change the way you answer, not just in the test, but maybe even when you speak English day to day?
Good thought to end on.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
If this tip helped you, give this stream a quick like so I know you're learning something valuable. If you're just joining, welcome. We've covered some key grammar so far, but don't worry, there's more to come. Like the EBU video, and if you're enjoying the stream, send it in the chat. This would be a good moment to take a screenshot or write this down. It could be the thing that gets you band 7+.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. This is where we take the information you need, the stuff you send us, and really get to the heart of it. We sift through it, pull out the key knowledge, the useful insights. Basically, we do the heavy lifting so you feel well-informed, fast.
And today, we're tackling something I know is on a lot of your minds. The IELTS speaking test. We've got excerpts here from IELTS Speaking by Adam Smith.pdf.
Right?
And our mission really is to distill the best strategies, the core advice from this guide. We want you walking into that test feeling, prepared, confident.
Exactly. We're going to focus on what the examiners are actually listening for. It's not always obvious.
No, it's not.
And we'll give you practical tips for each bit of the test. We know you're busy, you need to get this quickly, but properly understand it.
Aiming for those aha moments, without making your head spin.
Perfect. Let's dive in.
Okay, so the IELTS speaking test. It's pretty structured, actually. You've got 3 parts.
Few parts, okay.
Part 1 is the interview. Think general chat, familiar topics.
Like a warm-up.
Exactly. They hit part 2, the solo speech. They give you a cue card, a topic with some points, and you talk on your own for a bit.
Okay, the cue card part. Got it.
And finally, part 3. That's the discussion. It gets a bit more abstract, usually linked to your part 2 topic.
Right, deeper conversation. And how long does this all take?
The whole thing, usually around 11 to 14 minutes. Each part has its own sort of time slot within that.
Okay, 11 to 14 minutes. Now, I bet a lot of listeners are thinking, is one part, more important than the others? Where should I really focus my energy?
That's a really good question, and it's a bit nuanced. Officially, it's 1 score for the whole test. They don't score each part separately.
Ah, okay, so it all blends together.
It does, but thinking about what each part does is useful. Part 1, the warm-up. It lets the examiner ease you in. Test basic fluency.
Makes sense. Get the nerves out.
Yeah, but you won't get a top score just by acing part 1. They need to see more. And actually, keeping answers concise in part 1 shows you could be efficient, which they like.
Okay, so short and sweet for part 1 is actually a good thing. What about part 2, the solo speech?
That's where they really get a sense of your ability to speak at length, organize your thoughts, Keep going coherently. It forms a big part of their initial impression of your level.
So part 2 is pretty crucial for showing what you can do when speaking for longer. And part 3, the discussion.
Right, part 3. This is where you can really shine, honestly. It lets you show off your ability to handle more complex, abstract ideas, justify opinions.
So a good part 3 can really pull your score up.
Definitely. Even if part 2 wasn't perfect, smashing part 3 can make a big difference. It shows you can think and talk about trickier stuff.
Okay, that's really useful to understand the dynamic. Now, the scary bit.
Yeah.
What if you're sitting there and you don't understand the question in any part? That must happen.
Oh, it does. And it's okay. There are ways to handle it. In part 1, the examiner can repeat the question if you ask.
How do you ask?
Just politely. Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? Simple as that. They can't explain it in part 1, but they can say it again.
Okay. And if I still don't get it?
Try your best. Say something related to the topic, maybe based on words you did catch. Then just try and move on mentally to the next one. Don't let it derail you.
Right, don't get stuck. What about part 2 with the cue card?
Well, the question and the bullet points are written right there for you on the card. So because it's written, the examiner can't help you understand the words.
Ah, okay. So you're on your own with the card.
Pretty much. That 1-minute prep time is crucial for making sure you understand what you need to talk about.
Got it. And part 3, the discussion, can they help there?
Yes. In part 3, if you're stuck, the examiner can rephrase the question.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, you can ask, so, could you explain that question in a different way, please?
Ah.
It's a really useful tool to make sure you're answering what they actually mean.
That's brilliant. Knowing those options definitely lowers the panic potential.
Absolutely. And honestly, the big takeaway from the source material here is that the test is predictable in its format. Once you know the structure, know what to expect, you can prepare. And preparation is the key to confidence.
Okay, preparation, predictability. That makes it feel more manageable. So let's talk core strategies then. Things that work across all parts of the test. What are examiners fundamentally listening for?
Right, the big picture. There are a few key things. First, fluency. Can you speak reasonably smoothly without massive long pauses while you're searching for words?
Okay, keeping the flow going. Makes sense. What else?
Understanding and answering the actual question. Sounds obvious, right? But it's crucial. Answer directly. Don't go off on a tangent. Relevance is key.
Stay on topic. Got it. And vocabulary must be important too.
Hugely important. They want to see you have a good range. The source calls them smart words.
Smart words, like really complex ones.
Not necessarily super obscure words, no. It's more about using appropriate and varied language. Using the right word for the right situation, showing you have options, not just basic vocabulary.
Okay, precise and varied vocabulary, and the last main thing?
Grammar. Accuracy matters. Especially using tenses correctly, past, present, future. Good grammar helps you express your ideas clearly, especially the more complex ones.
Right. So fluency, answering the question, good vocab, accurate grammar, those are the pillars. Now, the guy gets specific about part 1, the interview. It mentions 5 simple rules. What are they?
Yeah, these are really handy for part 1. Rule 1. Keep answers pretty short. Aim for maybe 30 seconds, then stop confidently. Don't ramble.
Short, confident answers. Okay, rule 2.
Use full sentences. Even if it's a yes or no question, don't just say yes. Say, yes, I do because, or something like that. Expand slightly into a proper sentence.
Full sentences, check. Rule 3.
Try to use some words from the examiner's question in your answer. It shows you've understood and helps you stay relevant.
Echo the question a bit. Clever. Rule 4.
Give a reason, if you can. Briefly explain why you feel that way or why you do something. Adds a bit more substance.
Yeah, to because. Okay.
Right.
And the last one, rule 5.
If it is a yes-no question, make sure you actually say yes or no clearly at the start before you elaborate. Answer the question directly first.
Got it. So the 5 rules. Keep it short, full sentences, use their words, give a reason, answer yes, no directly. That's a solid plan for part 1. But what if they ask about something, I don't know, totally boring to me? Or something I know nothing about, like synchronized swimming.
Yeah, that happens. And the advice is simple. Just be honest.
Really? You don't have to pretend you love synchronized swimming.
Nope. It's totally fine to say you're not interested or don't know much about it. The key is how you say it. Be polite.
Okay, how would that sound?
Well, like the example in the guide, if they ask about dancing, you could say, actually, no, I don't really enjoy dancing. I'm not very musical, and honestly, I feel a bit awkward doing it.
Okay, just straightforward.
Or if it's about something you know nothing about, like, say, the future of folk music, you could say, To be honest, I'm afraid I don't really follow folk music, so I don't have much of an idea, but I suppose it will probably always have its fans.
So you admit you don't know, but maybe offer a tiny thought.
Exactly. It shows you can communicate even when you lack knowledge, which is still a skill.
Yeah.
It's better than making stuff up badly.
Right. Honesty is the best policy, even in IELTS. Okay, let's zoom in on part 1, then the interview. We know the rules. What else?
So part 1 is about 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 10 questions or so. And the topics are usually familiar, everyday things.
Like what?
Hobbies, family, friends, where you live, food, music, your studies, or work. Stuff you can generally talk about without too much specialized knowledge.
And we need to keep answers short, right? Around 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's the goal. Because the examiner has a list of topics to get through. Long, rambling answers just eat up time and don't really help. Concise is better here.
The guide had that example about home-cooked food versus restaurants, didn't it?
It did. Instead of a huge comparison, a good answer is like, oh, I definitely prefer home-cooked food. Mainly because I think it's healthier, you know what's going into it. And I actually quite enjoy cooking too.
Clear preference, a reason, maybe a little extra detail, then stop.
Exactly. That's the model for part 1.
And the guide lists loads of possible part 1 topics too. It's quite a range.
It is. Things like neighbors, houses, numbers, hometown, friends, reading, study, walking, parks, maps, games.
Wow, okay. Travel, work, collecting, cooking, even laughing. Emails, clothes, toys, shopping, sports.
Yeah, all sorts. Communication, musical instruments, free time, family. The point isn't to memorize answers for all these.
Right.
It's more about just thinking about them a bit beforehand, getting some basic vocabulary ready in your head for these common areas. Just helps you feel less surprised on the day.
Makes sense. Just having some thoughts ready reduces the chance of freezing up. Okay, let's tackle part 2. The solo speech and that cue card. What's the process here?
Okay, part 2. You get the cue card with the topic and bullet points. Then you get exactly 1 minute to prepare.
1 minute. Feels like no time at all.
It flies by. Then you have to speak on the topic for 1 to 2 minutes. And after you finish, the examiner might ask 1 or 2 quick follow-up questions based on what you said.
How on earth do you use that 1 minute effectively?
Good question. The key advice is, don't try to write sentences. Just make a simple list. Keywords or short phrases for each bullet point on the card.
Bullet points for the bullet points. Got it.
Yeah. Focus on understanding the topic quickly, then spend most of the minute jotting down those key ideas. Don't worry about perfect grammar or spelling in your notes. Just get points down.
Fast notes, focus on ideas. What else?
Well, if the topic is similar to something you've practiced or thought about, definitely try to use those ideas. Adapt them.
Reuse ideas if possible. Smart.
And again, don't stress about grammar during the prep time.
Yep.
Focus on content and maybe some key vocabulary you want to try and use. And practice this. Practice making quick notes for different topics. It's a skill you can build.
Practicing the preparation part itself. That's good advice. So you've got your notes. How do you actually talk for like 2 whole minutes?
The simplest strategy is just keep talking until the examiner stops you. They'll let you know when the time's up.
Okay, don't stop early.
Right. And to structure it, follow the bullet points on the card. Address them in order. That gives you a ready-made structure.
Okay, follow their roadmap.
And then to fill the time, develop each point, even simple ones. If it asks who the person is, don't just give their name. Give their name, age, maybe what they look like, where they live, how you know them. Add details.
Flesh out each bullet point with specifics.
Exactly. And use real examples. Tell little stories if they fit. That makes it more natural and gives you more to say. Also, pay attention to your tenses. Describing a person might involve past memories, present facts, future hopes related to them.
Use examples, tell stories, watch the tenses. Okay. The guide also had 3 important tips just for part 2. What were they again?
Right. Tip 1, use that prep time well. Get those ideas and keywords down in English.
Okay. Tip 2.
Give real examples. Talk about your actual experiences and feelings. It sounds more authentic. And honestly, it's usually easier to talk about something real than something you're inventing on the spot. If you get stuck, a quick, real anecdote can get you going again.
Real examples are easier and better. Got it. Tip 3.
Don't obsess about perfect grammar while you're speaking in part 2. Focus on getting your ideas across clearly, using good vocabulary. Fluency and communication are more the priority in that 2-minute stretch.
Okay, prioritize flow and vocab over perfect grammar during the speech itself. What about eye contact? Do I need to stare at the examiner for 2 minutes?
Actually, no. The guide specifically says don't worry too much about eye contact in part 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You need to look at the cue card to follow the points and glance at your notes to remember your ideas. The examiner understands that. Focus on delivering a structured answer using the card and your notes.
That's a relief. Okay, good to know. And you mentioned adapting ideas.
Yeah.
Can you reuse stuff you prepared for other topics?
Definitely. Look for overlaps. If you prepared ideas about a favorite gadget, maybe you can adapt some of that if you get a card about a gift you received or something you bought recently. Be flexible.
Smart. Think connections. What about using those fancy-sounding phrases some people memorize, like, today I am going to talk about?
Yeah, the source advises against using those formulaic phrases.
Why is that?
Examiners can spot them a mile off. They sound unnatural, memorized, and often don't quite fit the specific question anyway. They're not impressed by them. Just answer the question directly and naturally.
Okay, avoid the memorized scripts. Be genuine. Now, the guide lists a ton of Part 2 topics and sample answers. It's almost overwhelming.
It's a lot, but it shows the range. The key main topics it highlights are good starting points, though. Describing an object, a person, an event, an activity, a place, or a favorite thing, like a book or film.
Most questions fall into those buckets.
Yeah, a lot of them do. And seeing the specific examples, like describing a mobile phone or your father or Facebook or winter or planning to buy a camera, it helps you see how those main topics play out.
And the sample answers give you a feel for the structure and detail needed.
Exactly. And the list goes on, right? A journey, a conversation, a school subject, a festival, furniture, something funny, an advert, a vehicle, a TV show, something that made you angry, a foreign culture, a childhood toy, a team project.
A wild animal, a modern building, a teenage experience, an interesting lesson, an artist, a garden, an old building, a market, a celebration, a school, a game, a local change, a prize, a happy event, a place to relax, a skill, something naughty.
A favorite book, film, music. It's vast,
Yeah.
but seeing the patterns helps. Many involve describing something or someone or talking about an experience. Preparing vocabulary and ideas around those core themes is efficient.
Yeah, it seems less about preparing for every single specific topic and more about building flexible ideas and language for common themes.
That's exactly it. Use the list to spark ideas, not to memorize scripts. Okay, shall we move to the final part? Part 3, the discussion.
Yes, part 3. What's the setup here?
So this follows part 2, lasts maybe 4 to 5 minutes, about 5 questions or so. It links to the part 2 topic but goes broader, more abstract. It's about expressing opinions, justifying them, analyzing things.
A discussion, but the examiner leads, and I do most of the talking.
Pretty much, yeah. They'll ask questions to push you to explore the topic more deeply.
And there are common types of questions in part 3.
There are. The guide highlights 3 common ones: comparing and contrasting things, giving your opinion directly, and imagining or speculating about situations, often the future.
Okay, compare, contrast, opinion, imagine. The guide used cities as an example.
It did, like comparing city versus rural life, or asking your opinion on improving cities, or asking you to imagine what cities will be like in 50 years. Recognizing the question type helps you structure your answer.
Right. And you mentioned tenses are especially important here.
Yes, definitely in part 3, because you're often comparing past and present, or talking about the future. Using tenses accurately really shows grammatical control when dealing with these more complex ideas.
Be mindful of tenses. Got it. Now, these answers need to be longer, more developed than part 1. How do you do that naturally?
Good question. The source suggests a few techniques. One is to keep asking yourself why. Dig deeper into your reasons.
Yeah.
Another is to explain alternatives, like if this wasn't the case then. Also, use specific examples to back up your points. Examples make abstract ideas much clearer.
Right. Examples again.
And using simple structures can help organize longer answers, like saying firstly, secondly, finally, or using an idea explain example pattern for each point you make.
Those structures sound really helpful for keeping it coherent. Can I use ideas for my part 2 prep here?
Absolutely. The guide strongly recommends it. The part 3 topic is related, so the vocabulary and ideas you prepared for part 2 are often very relevant. It's a great foundation.
Okay, so part 2 prep does double duty. Are there other suggested ways to structure part 3 answers?
Yeah, a few more. There's the it depends. Approach acknowledging complexity. explaining different factors.
Yeah.
We mentioned firstly, secondly, finally. And another good one is explaining both sides of an argument before giving your own view. Shows balanced thinking.
Acknowledging complexity, structuring points, showing both sides. Good tools. And again, the guide has a massive list of Part 3 example questions.
Oh, yeah. It covers everything from the internet, politeness, status symbols, toys, technology at work, lessons, sports, wildlife, parties, leisure, transport, advice, community, history, competitions, river seas.
Wow. And general topics, too, like cities, weather, animals, computers, restaurants, celebrities, holidays, chores, study work, future plans, hobbies, food, success, design, sportsmen, TV, music, books, friends, travel. It's endless.
It really covers the gamut. And looking through them, you see the types of abstract thinking involved. How does X affect Y? What are the advantages or disadvantages? How has Z changed over time? What might happen in the future?
It's about practicing that kind of thinking and discussion in English.
Exactly. Not memorizing answers, but getting comfortable with discussing issues, speculating, justifying opinions.
Okay, but what if? What if they ask something and I genuinely have no clue? Like, zero idea. Part 3 seems harder to bluff.
Yeah, it can be trickier. The guide suggests two main paths if you're truly stumped. First, honesty again.
Just say, I don't know.
Pretty much, but explain why, briefly if you can.
Honestly, that's not something I've ever really thought about, know much about, because
Okay, and the second option.
make an educated guess. But say you're guessing. Well, I'm not really sure, but I would imagine that perhaps. Or if I had to guess, I'd say. It shows you're still trying to engage.
Honesty or a flagged guess. Better than silence. Okay, last thing for part 3, the 3 simple tips.
Right. Final tips for the discussion. 1, be confident, or at least project confidence. Speak clearly, don't mumble.
Fake it till you make it a bit.
Sort of, yeah. 2, don't be afraid to disagree politely with the examiner's premise. Or offer a different view, just back it up with reasons. Okay, it's a discussion, not just agreement.
Exactly. And 3, speak naturally. Try to make it feel like a real conversation. Listen to the question. Give your genuine thoughts.
Confidence, willingness to disagree, politely, and natural speech. Got it. The source also mentioned thinking of answers like a paragraph.
Yeah, like a mini essay structure almost. Main idea, explanation, support, maybe an example. That can help build a full logical answer.
Okay, that's a really helpful way to think about it. So let's pull this all together. We've dived into the IELTS speaking test based on this guide. We know the 3-part structure. We know examiners want fluency, relevance, good vocab, and accuracy.
Right.
Part 1. Follow the 5 simple rules, short, full sentences, use their words, give reasons, say yes, no.
Yep.
Part 2. Use the prep minute wisely for notes. Follow the card, use real examples, add details, focus on flow over perfection, and use your notes card. Don't stress eye contact. Part 3. Expect abstract discussion, use techniques like why, examples, and structures to give longer answers. Use your Part 2 knowledge. Handle don't know honestly or with guess. And be confident and natural.
You've got it. That's the core playbook distilled from this guide. These are the practical, actionable things that should help you, the learner, walk into that test feeling much more prepared and clear about what you need to do.
Absolutely. It feels much less mysterious now. So here's something to think about as you practice. Which of these techniques feels like it could make the biggest difference for you? How might really focusing on using those real-life examples and properly explaining your why actually change the way you answer, not just in the test, but maybe even when you speak English day to day?
Good thought to end on.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
You know, trying to stay properly informed these days, it really feels like a huge job, doesn't it?
It really does. Just so much stuff coming at you all the time. Information overload is definitely a thing.
Yeah, like you're swimming, maybe drowning, in this sea of information, news cycles, articles, research, and trying to work out what actually, well, matters.
It's tough.
Well, that's basically why we do the deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners give us their sources, the stuff they're grappling with.
And we try to boil it down, find the core insights, the stuff that's really useful.
Exactly. Think of it as your express lane to getting genuinely knowledgeable about something specific.
And today, look, we're setting out on a pretty ambitious journey, I'd say.
A bit of a marathon, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. We've got this large pile of PDF documents, and the goal is, well, a really thorough exploration. We're aiming for something quite comprehensive, maybe around 3 hours worth of material synthesized.
It's a big ask, but a great chance to connect dots across a lot of different topics, all pulled from these documents.
Definitely. It's a synthesis challenge.
So what are these documents then, the ones demanding this deep focus?
They're IELTS preparation materials. covering the 4 main skills: reading, listening, speaking, and writing.
Okay, so IELTS prep. Might sound a bit niche at first glance.
You might think so, but the actual content within them is surprisingly varied. I mean, really broad.
Like what?
Well, we're talking about things like how libraries organize books, the Dewey Decimal System, and others,
Right.
through to how global economics affects migration, the science of the ozone layer, even adolescent psychology.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So not just language drills then.
Not at all. It covers language learning strategies, sure, but also environmental issues, social trends, test-taking tips. It's quite the mix, a real intellectual buffet, you could say.
A smorgasbord. I like that.
So our mission, really, for this extended deep dive,
Our quest.
our quest, yes,
Hmm.
is to dig out those unexpected facts, the practical bits of knowledge you can actually use, and maybe spot some surprising links between all these different areas.
Kind of providing a shortcut then to getting informed on a whole range of topics that come up, not just in language tests, but sort of in understanding the world more broadly.
Precisely. A shortcut to being well-informed about a variety of things. Okay, shall we dive in? Let's start with the IELTS reading skills materials.
Let's do it. Right, so cracking open those reading PDFs, one of the first things that jumped out at me was the whole system behind library organization.
Ah, yes. It's not just random shelving, is it?
Definitely not.
Mm.
There are these 3 main systems they mentioned. The Dewey Decimal System, that one probably rings a bell for most
The
people.
one with all the numbers, yeah.
Right. And then there's the Universal Decimal Classification, or UDC, and the Library of Congress system.
And what's interesting is how they each represent a different philosophy of, like, categorizing all human knowledge. Dewey's very hierarchical, numerical. UDC builds on that but gets more complex, showing relationships between subjects. Library of Congress uses letters and numbers, more subject-focused, maybe
Definitely.
more flexible in some ways.
It really makes you appreciate the effort that goes into just finding a single book on a shelf.
It does, that whole human drive to organize information, make it accessible.
But speaking of libraries, the materials didn't just talk about the systems. They also touched on the, well, threats they face today.
Yeah, funding is a big one, wasn't it? Especially with technology changing how we access information.
Exactly. And plus, the skills needed are changing too, both for the people using the library and for the librarians themselves.
That's a huge point. Libraries aren't just book warehouses anymore. They're becoming community hubs, digital resource centers.
So librarians need tech skills now, basically.
Absolutely. Digital literacy, guiding people through online resources. It's a massive shift in their role, adapting to this whole new information landscape.
Okay, now this next bit from the reading section really surprised me. Esperanto.
Ah, yes. The international language.
I mean, I've sort of heard of it, but the material said it's used by about 1 million people.
Apparently so. And not just, as a hobby. It has real-world uses, specialized fields, international radio broadcasts, publications, translations of literature, both contemporary stuff and classics.
Wow. And the China connection was particularly striking.
Oh, absolutely. Taught in universities there, used a lot for translating science and tech documents.
There's a magazine, too.
Yeah, El Popolacinio, a monthly magazine, apparently widely read. And get this, Radio Beijing's Esperanto program, supposedly the most popular Esperanto broadcast in the world.
That's incredible. It really shows the, I guess, potential for a neutral language, doesn't it? To bridge gaps.
It does suggest that, yes, a fascinating case study.
Completely fascinating. Okay, shifting gears a bit. The materials also talked about international economics and how that drives migration.
Right, the push and pull factors.
They gave some historical examples. Like during World War II, the U.S. had an agreement with Mexico to bring in temporary workers because so many Americans were overseas.
Yeah, the Bracero program. And that's a pattern you see again and again. Labor demands, economic opportunities, they really shape how people move around the globe.
Post-war Europe, too, right? With the guest workers.
Exactly. Rebuilding economies needed labor. And then later, you had the oil boom in the 70s and 80s drawing workers to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait.
So economics is a massive driver of migration flows. Makes sense.
It's a fundamental link.
Okay, now let's circle back to the IELTS context. Vocabulary.
Ah, yes. Can't avoid that in a reading test.
The materials were pretty blunt about it, weren't they? Basically saying the IELTS reading is, well, a vocabulary test.
Pretty much. They strongly advise keeping a vocabulary notebook.
Right. Noting down the word, it's part of speech, synonyms, that kind of thing.
Which is just good language learning practice anyway, isn't it? Building that strong vocabulary helps with everything, not just exams.
And the notebook idea, with parts of speech and synonyms, it pushes you to understand the word more deeply, how it's used.
Exactly. More nuance.
So what about words you just don't know when you hit one in the text?
Guessing from context. That was the key strategy mentioned.
Yeah, they gave that example about computer crimes, listing things like fraud, theft. Even if you didn't know one specific term, the others give you a pretty good clue.
It's all about being an active reader, using those contextual clues. It's a really valuable skill, way beyond just passing a test.
Definitely. Okay, let's dip into some science that was in the reading passages. The ozone layer.
Right. Earth's natural sunscreen.
We all kind of learned about it in school.
Yeah.
That layer high up, absorbing the sun's harmful UV radiation.
And the materials explained, the potential consequences if that shield weakens too much.
Serious stuff like increased risk of skin cancer, cataracts.
And even impacting agriculture, reducing food production. It really highlights how delicate that atmospheric balance is.
And how connected everything is. The atmosphere, our health, food.
Absolutely. Interconnectedness is a key theme.
Okay, sticking with the environment but moving to agriculture. This was complex.
It really is. The whole issue of encouraging environmentally friendly farming.
Yeah, like sometimes farmers need actual financial incentives to use greener methods, or even just to not farm certain land.
Because the greener way might not be the most profitable, at least not in the short term. And farmers, understandably, might not love being paid not to produce food.
It highlights that tension between economic reality and environmental goals, doesn't it?
It really does. And then there was the idea of using crop residues like corn stalks for fuel.
Biofuels like ethanol, biomass.
Yeah, potentially greener than fossil fuels, but often needing subsidies themselves to actually compete economically.
Right. But then on the flip side, in poorer countries, the material said that subsidies for things like pesticides and artificial fertilizers can actually cause more environmental harm.
Paradoxical, isn't it? But if subsidies encourage overuse.
You get pesticide resistance, health problems for farm workers from exposure, soil getting degraded.
Exactly. It creates this damaging cycle. Short-term yield focus leading to long-term environmental and health problems.
Tricky stuff. And related to that, there was mention of the Uruguay round of world trade talks.
Ah, yes, the potential environmental fallout from trade agreements.
So the idea was maybe reducing farm subsidies in rich countries could shift food production elsewhere.
Which could mean less intensive farming in those rich countries, potentially good.
But the worry is it might increase pressure to convert natural habitats like forests into farmland in other countries to meet the demand.
It's that global ripple effect again, isn't it? Trade policy decisions in one place having ecological consequences thousands of miles away. Need for very careful consideration.
Definitely. Okay, quick history lesson now. Fertilizers in the 19th century.
Ah, yes. A little detour into agricultural chemistry. They mention key figures. Liebig, Boussingault, Laws.
Von Liebig figured out nitrogen was crucial for plants, right? And he invented beef broth cubes, OXO cubes.
Apparently so. Quite the side hustle. And Laws patented the first commercially successful artificial fertilizer superphosphate.
It's wild to think how those breakthroughs basically paved the way for modern agriculture.
Absolutely. Dramatically boosted food yields, changed everything, though, as we just discussed, not without some environmental costs we're still dealing with. Liebig knew about nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the NPK basics.
Right. Okay, changing topic again, and this one's pretty sobering. Passive smoking.
Yeah, the dangers of secondhand smoke. The materials cited research showing non-smokers living with smokers have a significantly higher risk.
Heart disease, lung cancer.
And that UCSF study suggesting it might be even worse for non-smokers because their bodies have zero tolerance built up.
That's scary. It really hammers home that it's not just annoying, it's a serious public health issue.
Definitely. The report listed all the nasty stuff in smoke, carbon monoxide, nicotine, and argued for treating the risks almost like, well, illegal drugs or AIDS in terms of seriousness. Affects the respiratory system, inflammation, cell damage.
Yikes. Okay, let's lighten the mood slightly. Dung beetles.
Ha! Yes, the unsung heroes of the pasture.
Fascinating little creatures. Their job is basically burying animal dung, right? And different types do it differently.
Exactly. Some tunnel right underneath, others roll it away into little balls.
The rollers, I've seen pictures of those.
And some apparently attach it to plants. And farmers actually benefit from having a mix of species active at different times.
And the right mix depends on the climate, like French beetles for cooler places, South African ones for warmer.
Precisely. It's a brilliant example of how ecosystems work, how biodiversity provides real, practical benefits, nutrient cycling, pest control.
Amazing what goes on that we don't even notice.
Totally.
Okay, next up. The World Health Organization's definition of health. It was broader than I expected.
Much broader than just not being sick, wasn't it?
Yeah. They talked about the fundamental conditions needed for health. Things like peace, shelter, education, food, income.
A stable ecosystem, social justice, equity. It's that whole socio-ecological view.
So health isn't just about individual choices or going to the doctor.
Not according to the WHO. It's about the bigger picture, the social, economic, environmental context that shapes our well-being. Tackling those wider issues is key.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, back to the practicalities of the IELTS reading test itself. Strategies.
Yes, the nuts and bolts. Time management is crucial, obviously.
Don't get stuck on one hard question. Move on.
Analyze your mistakes when you practice. Why did you get it wrong?
They mentioned creating keyword tables to help find info in the passages faster.
Yeah, all solid practical tips. Good test taking isn't just knowing the stuff, it's having those strategies down. Applicable to almost any standardized test, really.
Right. Now, here's something I found interesting. Green tourism.
Ah, sustainable travel. What about it?
Well, apparently, even though people say they're interested, travel agents report pretty low actual demand for genuinely eco-friendly holidays.
That's a common finding, the gap between intention and action.
And it's hard for consumers, too, apparently. So many different eco-labels, certifications, and a lot of greenwashing.
Yeah, companies claiming to be green when they're maybe not so much makes it tough to choose responsibly.
Plus, the definition of sustainable tourism is broad, not just environment, but also economic benefits for locals, social inclusion.
It's complex, definitely a challenge for the industry and for travelers trying to do the right thing.
Okay, paragraph headings in IELTS reading. Tricky question type.
They can be tough, yeah. Matching the heading to the main idea of the paragraph.
The example used was about population density in cities. Why haven't cities spread out more, even with remote work tech?
And the answer was?
Agglomeration economies. Basically, the benefit of having people in similar fields close together. It sparks creativity, innovation.
The power of face-to-face, even now. Interesting. It challenges that idea that tech would just make everyone disperse.
Yeah, the value of co-location.
Makes sense.
Quick historical mention, Sir Isaac Newton.
Can't ignore him. One of the most influential figures ever.
Lagrange called him the greatest genius ever lived. And Newton's famous quote,
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
yeah,
Acknowledging that progress builds on past work. Beautifully put.
still relevant today.
Absolutely. A timeless reminder about the cumulative nature of knowledge.
Okay, switching to adolescent psychology now.
A complex time. The materials talked about mood swings, big cognitive and emotional changes.
Peers becoming more influential than parents, maybe?
Yeah,
The search for identity.
right. And they mentioned G. Stanley Hall's idea of storm and stress.
But also Margaret Mead suggesting culture plays a bigger role than just biology.
Exactly. Nature versus nurture, in a way. And the importance of positive psychology, supportive parenting for healthy development.
A good overview of that tricky teenage phase.
Indeed. Just a quick note also mentioned was how universities get their money.
Oh, yeah. Different models.
State funding, private donors, student tuition fees. It varies a lot, reflects different philosophies about higher education, really.
Right. Okay, now this is cool. Sharks.
Ah, the changing perception of sharks.
Yeah, moving away from just mindless eating machines.
Towards creatures with problem-solving skills, complex social lives.
Their brain-to-body size ratio is apparently comparable to some mammals and birds. Who knew?
And intricate migration patterns, though the formal research into their behavior is still pretty new, relatively speaking.
It's great that we're challenging those old negative stereotypes, though. They sound fascinating.
They really are. Much more complex than Jaws would have you believe.
Definitely. Okay, the Stanford prison study got to mention.
A classic, infamous experiment in psychology, looking at the psychological effects of prison roles.
But it had to be stopped early, right? After only 6 days.
Yeah, because the participants got so distressed, it raised huge ethical questions, obviously.
But it did show how powerfully situations can affect behavior, didn't it?
Yeah.
Power dynamics, confinement.
Profound insights, despite the ethical issues. A landmark study.
Right. A slightly different angle. English public schools and the aristocracy's ethos.
And how that influenced Pierre de Coubertin, the Olympics founder.
Yeah, the whole healthy mind and a healthy body idea. Mens sana in corpore sano.
And the ideal of the all-rounder not being too specialized.
And that weird idea that training too much was like cheating because it wasn't just natural talent.
Huh. Yes, the amateur ideal. It definitely shaped the early values of modern sport and the Olympics. Holistic education.
Interesting historical context. Okay, linguistics term. Corpus.
A body of language data, basically. A large, growing collection of real-world language examples.
Often recorded, focusing on specific stages of language learning.
Exactly. And they mentioned the BNC, the British National Corpus, which aimed to document English from a specific time period.
So these corpora are tools for researchers.
Invaluable tools, analyzing how language is actually used, tracking changes, informing teaching.
Got it. And related to teaching reading. Phonics.
The method of linking sounds to letters.
Yeah, associating sounds with letters or letter groups, then blending those sounds to read unknown words.
Fundamental for early reading. Decoding the written word by understanding that sound-symbol relationship.
Makes sense. Okay, almost done with reading. Child language acquisition research. Two main ways they study it.
Naturalistic sampling and experimentation.
Naturalistic is like recording kids talking naturally at home.
Yep. Spontaneous language in comfortable settings. But its limitation is you don't always know what they understand, only what they say.
And experimentation is more controlled, setting up specific tasks to test a hypothesis.
Right. But the challenge there is whether the findings from a controlled task actually apply to real-world language use, generalizability.
So both methods have pros and cons.
Exactly. They complement each other. Using both gives a fuller picture of how kids learn language.
Okay, wow. That was a lot just from the reading materials. A huge range of topics.
It really underscores, doesn't it? For IELTS reading, you need strong vocabulary, good strategies, yes, but also just a broad base of general knowledge helps enormously. You never know what topic will come up.
Absolutely. Right then, shall we move on to the listening skills section?
Let's do it.
Okay, so IELTS listening. The materials really stress that listening isn't just something you're good or bad at. It's a learnable skill.
Yes, and often the one language learners have developed the least, interestingly.
Which makes sense, I guess. It just washes over you sometimes.
Exactly. So the advice was to actively train your ears. Use recordings. Focus on how words sound in a flowing sentence, not just in isolation.
Repetition seems key. Using an MP3 player or something to replay tricky bits.
And even saying phrases aloud yourself helps with pronunciation and recognition. It's about breaking down that wall of sound.
Makes sense. And for the test itself, knowing the question types is vital, right?
Absolutely crucial. Form completion, multiple choice, matching, labeling diagrams or maps. You need to know what each one demands.
And strategies like eliminating wrong answers in multiple choice.
Watching out for traps distractors the examiners put in, using your time wisely between sections, general focus.
Practice tests were mentioned a lot too.
But not just doing them. Analyzing your mistakes is where the real learning happens, and using those short breaks in the test to prep for the next part.
Okay, something that surprised me. Spelling. How critical it is in the listening.
Yes. You can understand the answer perfectly, but if you spell it wrong on the answer sheet...
You lose the mark. Ouch.
Exactly. So they give tips for improving spelling, especially for Section 4, which tends to be the toughest academically.
And for multiple choice, look for keywords in the question, then listen for synonyms or opposites in the audio. Careful listening.
Meticulous attention to detail is really the name of the game.
They also acknowledged common problems students face, which was good, like concentration lapses.
The speed of the recording sometimes, unfamiliar accents.
Reassuring to know others struggle with those too. And practice helps.
It does, and don't forget the small stuff. Capital letters for proper nouns, though lowercase is usually okay, and plurals. That sprig can make all the difference if the grammar needs it.
Right, transferring answers carefully at the end is vital too. Spelling, grammar. Double check.
And they highlighted understanding signposting language.
What's that exactly?
Words and phrases speakers use to signal where the talk is going. Like firstly, however, in conclusion. Now let's look at recognizing those helps you follow the structure.
Ah, okay. Like road signs in a lecture.
Good analogy. Also, being able to follow a conversation between two or more people is key for some sections.
And finally, they recommended listening to stuff you actually like.
Yes, topics that interest you. Makes practice less of a chore. And podcasts. Great source of real English, natural conversation.
So the big takeaway for listening, it's a skill, practice strategically, pay attention to detail, understand the test format, you can improve.
Precisely. Okay, ready for speaking skills?
Let's talk about talking, IELTS speaking, Part 1 first, the basics.
General tips here. Answer the question directly. Don't just say yes. Explain why. Give reasons.
Don't memorize answers, though, right? Keep it natural.
Absolutely. Use linking words to connect ideas smoothly. If you make a mistake, just correct yourself calmly. Don't panic.
And, yeah, if it's a yes-no question, actually say yes or no before you elaborate. Seems obvious, but...
Good foundational advice for any structured conversation, really, but especially in a test. Shows you can develop a point.
And the materials gave loads of example Part 1 topics and sample answers. Everyday stuff.
Neighbors, hometown, remembering numbers, reading, friends, games, travel, mobiles, clothes, sports, writing letters, shopping. Covers a lot of ground.
Seeing those examples helps you anticipate the kinds of things they might ask, how detailed the answers should be.
Exactly. Not for memorizing, but for getting a feel for the level and style.
Okay, Part 2, the long turn. 1 minute prep, 2 minutes talk.
The advice for that prep minute: keep notes simple. Keywords, maybe a quick list.
Don't try to write full sentences.
No time. Decide your angle quickly. Focus on your notes. Don't worry about erasing stuff. Just get ideas down.
And they suggested preparing ideas beforehand for general topic areas.
Yeah, that's a smart strategy. Think about 6 main categories.
Yeah.
An object, a person, an event, an activity, a place, a favorite thing.
Because lots of Part 2 questions fall into those buckets, right?
Often, yes. So having some vocabulary and maybe a little story ready for each can really reduce the panic on the day.
They gave specific examples, too. Describe being late. A photo, a park, a meal, friends, popular games, a journey, something you dislike about phones, comfy clothes, a sport you wish you were good at.
Having thought about those kinds of things in advance makes a huge difference to confidence and fluency.
Definitely. Now, pronunciation. Obviously important.
Key thing is clarity. Speak clearly. Don't rush. Don't mumble.
Use stress on the right words and sentences. Vary your intonation.
Yes, all that helps convey meaning. But the main advice was, don't obsess about your accent. Focus on being understood. Clarity over perfection.
Good advice. And then even more Part 2 examples with sample answers.
A real treasure trove there. Describing an admired person, like a father, a website, Facebook, favorite season, a future plan, a journey, furniture, something funny, a TV show, TED Talks.
A team project, a garden, Monet's, an old building, Empire State, a market, primary school, an indoor game, chess, a change for your town, a prize you'd like, employee of the year, a happy memory, a place, a practical skill, driving.
That list is incredibly comprehensive. Studying those samples shows you how to structure the 2 minutes, what vocabulary works, how to develop ideas. Really valuable.
Then Part 3, the discussion part. Follow-up questions from Part 2, plus broader topics.
Like education, environment, influence of TV. More abstract discussion.
And the technique for giving longer answers here.
Ask yourself why. Explain alternatives, give specific examples. They use the topic of kids having their own ideas versus just learning from teachers to show how to expand.
Make it personal, speak naturally, like a mini paragraph for each answer.
And they offered that simple structure. Idea, explain, example, illustrated it with the topic of why holidays are important.
Plus, tons more sample. Part 3 questions on loads of topics. Transport, history, future, holidays, chores, study work.
Again, gives you a great feel for the kind of abstract thinking and discussion required. So, for speaking overall, practice fluency, expand answers with reasons, examples, prep for common topics, aim for clarity.
Got it. Okay, final stretch. Writing. Task 1, academic first. The report.
Right. At least 150 words, about 20 minutes. Describe a visual graph, chart, table, map, process.
Key rules. Describe main features, make comparisons if relevant, and absolutely no personal opinions. Just objective description.
Exactly. And use the right language for describing changes in graphs, significant growth, reached a peak, leveled off, fluctuated, mostly past tense for past data.
Those preposition exercises seemed useful too. A rise of 50 versus rose by 50. Getting that right.
Crucial for accuracy, also describing quantities. The number of, for countable nouns, the amount of, for uncountable, correct verb agreement.
And using qualifiers for percentages just over, approximately, nearly, and proportion words, majority, minority, significant proportion.
And comparing data using words like while or whereas, and remembering things like 2 million, not 2 millions. Small details matter.
They provided sample answers for different types too, didn't they?
Yes. A process diagram, making bricks, a diagram, water cycle, maps showing changes over time, Chorleywood Village.
And then that whole section of good sample answers worth reading. loads of them.
Tables, line graphs, pie charts, bar charts, diagrams, pictures, covering topics from daily activities and house prices to Olympic medals and solar panels. Really diverse examples.
Analyzing those good answers is probably the best way to learn, right? See how they structure it, the language they use, the comparisons they make.
Absolutely key. Clear structure, accurate description of key features, relevant comparisons, precise language, that's the goal.
Okay, finally, writing task 2, the essay.
The big one. At least 250 words, about 40 minutes, responding to an argument or discussion topic.
And they recommended a process. Analyze topic, brainstorm, decide opinion, plan, write an intro, write body paragraphs, write conclusion, check.
And suggested time allocation. Maybe 10 minutes planning, 5 intro, 20 body, 5 conclusion checking. Just a guideline, but helpful.
Understanding the type of question is vital too. To what extent?
Oh,
Discuss both views, advantages, disadvantages, causes solutions, 2-part questions.
they gave examples for each, like technology versus tradition, to what extent robots, discuss both views, computer games, advantages, disadvantages, road accidents, cause solutions, moving to cities' gun ownership, 2-parter.
Brainstorming is key. They showed an example for studying abroad, listing pros and cons.
And for introductions, keep them concise, maybe 2 sentences. Introduce topic, state your position clearly, especially for to what extent questions. Using I is generally okay.
Difference between a strong opinion essay and a balanced one was explained too.
And body paragraphs. Start with a clear topic sentence, then explain, then give an example, maybe a linking sentence at the end to transition smoothly.
They showed how to turn brainstormed points into paragraphs, using examples about older people values, government support for elderly, private versus public education.
And transition words. Crucial for flow. They listed loads categorized by function, adding points, contrasting, showing cause-result, giving examples, indicating time.
Finally, tailor them to the question type, summarize main points, restate your position perhaps, examples provided for different types.
And just like Task 1, a massive collection of sample essays for Task 2. High-scoring examples covering an incredible range of topics.
University, staff rewards, foreign aid, economic development issues, music's influence, working from home, tech and relationships, hobbies, gaming addiction, aging population, cloning ethics, arts funding, fame, private education taxes, wild animals, bad drivers, school uniforms, repairing items, learning languages young, school curriculum focus, overseas holidays, internet and social skills, repaying tuition fees, advertising morals, alternative medicine, purpose of university, crime reduction, arts versus public services, city overpopulation, cloning again. Wow.
It's an exhaustive list. Studying those model essays is invaluable for seeing how to structure arguments, use sophisticated vocabulary, and achieve that high band score level. Shows you the standard.
Absolutely. Structure, argument, vocabulary, grammar. It's all there in the examples.
So that brings us towards the end of this pretty epic 3-hour deep dive into these IELTS materials. We've covered a huge amount of ground.
We really have. From library systems and Esperanto,
To agricultural impacts, shark intelligence, dung beetles,
passive smoking risks, adolescent psychology, the history of fertilizers, the printing press,
language change models, raising ducks, malaria spread.
and of course, threaded through it all, detailed strategies and advice for every single part of the IELTS test. Reading, listening, speaking, and both writing tasks.
It's amazing how much diverse knowledge is packed into language preparation materials, isn't it?
It really is. Who knew prepping for a language test could involve learning about dung beetles or the Uruguay round?
So for everyone listening, we really hope this very thorough exploration, this synthesis of all those PDFs has been useful. A genuine shortcut, perhaps, to getting your head around a wide array of topics.
You've definitely encountered information you probably weren't expecting when you thought about IELTS prep.
Maybe now you're thinking more about, I don't know, the future of constructed languages like Esperanto, or the latest in sustainable farming, or the ethics of technology and relationships.
Could be. Plenty of rabbit holes to go down if any particular topic sparked your interest.
So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Just consider how interconnected everything is. Language, environment, society, technology, personal growth. They all weave together.
Yeah, it's not all separate boxes. Learning about one thing often sheds light on another.
Exactly. The quest for knowledge is ongoing, and hopefully some of the insights from this deep dive, even though it came from language test prep, can be applied more broadly to how you understand the world and keep learning.
If this tip helped you, give this stream a quick like so I know you're learning something valuable. If you're just joining, welcome. We've covered some key grammar so far, but don't worry, there's more to come. Like the EBU, video, and if you're enjoying the stream, send it in the chat. This would be a good moment to take a screenshot or write this down. It could be the thing that gets you band 7+.
Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us some really useful stuff to get our teeth into today. Excerpts from Adam Smith's Task 1 IELTS Writing Academic Training module.
Yeah, looks good.
Our mission, to basically cut through it all and extract the essential knowledge, the insights you really need to, well, hopefully master the IELTS Academic Writing Task 1.
Exactly. Think of this as your personal shortcut to understanding Task 1. We're not just telling you what the source says, but helping you understand why certain approaches work, how they can boost your score.
Right.
This task, it asks you to look at a visual, could be a graph, a chart, maybe a diagram, a map, or even a process, and then write a clear, concise report about it.
And it can feel like, wow, a lot to take in, can't it? Especially with all the different kinds of visuals they might throw at you.
Definitely.
But our goal today is to make it feel much more manageable. We're going to focus on those core strategies, the ones that should help you no matter what kind of visual you're actually looking at.
So let's start right at the beginning, understanding the task itself. What are the absolute must-knows right off the bat?
Okay, let's unpack this. Time. That's a big one, isn't it?
Huge.
You get 60 minutes for the whole writing test, but task 1,
Yeah.
it's got a strict 20-minute limit.
20 minutes. Not long.
No. And you also need to write at least 150 words. It's easy to get bogged down trying to perfect every single sentence, but managing that time effectively is, well, it's non-negotiable here.
Absolutely. And the basic objective, the point of task 1 is information transfer. You're taking that visual data, the picture, and turning it into a written summary.
Okay.
What's really key to understand is that you need to explain the main features, the main things you see, and make comparisons where they, naturally come up.
Ah, comparisons. Important.
Yes, but critically, this isn't about giving your opinion, no, I think, or this is surprising, because it's purely objective. Just report what the information shows.
That's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? It's not an essay arguing a point. You're like a neutral observer, just reporting the facts from the visual.
Yeah, exactly. Think data journalist. Just the facts.
Okay, got it. Now, what about structure? How do you organize this report for, maximum clarity? The source material mentions a specific structure.
It does. It recommends a 4-paragraph structure. Pretty straightforward, actually.
4 paragraphs. What are they?
It's designed to give a clear framework, make it easy for the examiner to follow your thinking. So you have an introduction, then an overall view, and then 2 body paragraphs that go into the details.
Intro, overall view, 2 body paragraphs.
Okay.
And what's the job of each one? What are they supposed to achieve?
Right. So the introduction, that's your opening. You state clearly what the report is about, identify the visual, mention the main trends it shows. Basically, put the question they gave you into your own words.
Ah, paraphrasing, not just copying.
Exactly. Paraphrasing shows you understand it, you can express it differently. That's a skill they're testing.
Makes sense. What comes after the intro?
Next up is the overall view paragraph. This is really important. You step back and summarize the biggest, most general trends you see.
The big picture.
The big picture, exactly. If there are obvious comparisons at our high level, mention them here. The source says aim for at least 2 key general points, maybe 2 or 3 sentences.
And this shows the examiner right away that you've understood the main message of the visual.
Precisely. It shows you've grasped the key takeaways immediately.
And just to be clear, this overall view, it's not like a conclusion you'd write in an essay.
Good question. No, not really a conclusion in that sense. It's a summary of main points. And interestingly, you can put it either right after the introduction, or you could actually put it right at the end of the report. Both ways work.
Okay, flexible. So after the overview, we get to the body paragraphs.
Yes, the 2 body paragraphs. This is where you dive into the specifics. Describe the most important features, the key trends, but, and this is crucial, you back it up with actual data from the visual. Numbers, figures.
Right, evidence.
Evidence. And the source suggests aiming for about 6 or 7 sentences in total for both paragraphs combined.
6 or 7 sentences for all the details, so you have to be selective.
Very selective. That's the key word. You can't describe every single blip on a graph, especially if it's complex.
So what do you focus on?
Focus on grouping similar trends together. Look for the most important things, and absolutely include specific numbers to support what you're saying. Making relevant comparisons within these paragraphs is also really good. Shows deeper analysis.
Okay, so it's about picking out the important stuff, grouping it logically, using numbers and comparing where it makes sense, not just listing data points.
You've got it. It's about showing you can identify what matters and analyze the relationships in the data.
Right. Now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about some essential writing techniques, things that can really make a difference to the score. First one mentioned is using the right verb tense. Why is that so critical?
Well, the tense you use has to match the time frame in the visual. It sounds obvious, but it's easy to get wrong.
So if it's data from the past,
Use the past tense. If the graph shows trends from 1990 to 2000, you need verbs like increased, fell, remained stable.
and if there's no time, like a process diagram.
Then usually present tense is the way to go.
Yeah.
The water is heated, the components are assembled, that kind of thing. And of course, if it shows future
The
projections.
future tense will increase, is expected to fall.
Exactly. Getting the tense wrong can completely change the meaning, so it's fundamental for accurate reporting.
Definitely. Okay, next up, describing trends. The language of change, as the source calls it. What kind of vocabulary are we talking about here?
Oh, there's a whole toolkit of words for this. For things going up, you've got your basic rise, increase, grow, but also stronger ones like climb, boom, go up.
And you can modify them. Right?
Yes, with adverbs. That's where you add precision. Was the increase dramatic, sharp, steep, or maybe substantial, considerable, significant, rapid, or perhaps more gentle, like moderate, gradual, slight, minimal?
Wow, lots of options.
And don't forget the nouns. A rise, an increase, a growth. Using a variety shows good vocabulary range. Instead of just increased, maybe experienced significant growth or saw a sharp rise.
Okay, and for things going down?
Similar idea. Verbs like fall, decrease, reduce, decline, dip, go down. And again, adverbs to describe how moderately, gradually, slightly, minimally. And the nouns, a fall, a decrease, a reduction.
What if things don't change much?
Good point. Use phrases like leveled out, remained stable, remained steady, stayed constant, or maintained the same level.
It's really important to vary this language, isn't it? Avoid just saying increased, increased, decreased.
Absolutely. That variety is key for a higher band score. The source also talks about connecting trends. What's the value in that?
Connecting trends helps you report flow better, makes it more coherent, more analytical. Instead of just listing facts, you use linking words to show relationships.
Like what sort of relationships?
Well, sequence, first it went up, then it went down. Contrast, sales increased, however, profits fell. Cause and effect. Maybe following this initial rise, sales subsequently decreased. It shows you understand the story the data is telling.
Right. Building a narrative from the data makes sense. Now, something that often trips people up, prepositions with numbers. The source mentions to by, with, and at. Can you clarify those?
Yeah, this is about precision. You use to for the final level reached, like unemployment rose to 10%.
Okay, the end point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You use by for the amount or margin of change. It decreased by 5%.
Yeah,
That's the difference between the start and end points.
got it. Change amount. What about with?
With often states the figure something started at or achieved. The company launched with a 75% market share.
And at.
At is usually for a specific point in time or a level reached at a peak or trough. Sales peaked at $1 million in July. Using these correctly makes your writing much clearer. Super important for accuracy. Okay, the source also covers describing numbers, percentages, fractions. What are the different ways to do that?
Well, you've got options to keep it varied. Obviously, you can use the numbers themselves.
Just the digits.
Yeah, or use fractions. Remember how to write them. Half, 12, a quarter, 14, but then 1/3, 13, 2/5, 25, and so on.
Right, and percentages.
Percentages are 8. The source notes you can put the percentage figure at the start or end of a sentence for variety, like 15% of people, or the proportion was 15%.
That's in other ways.
Yeah, multipliers. Double, treble, or triple, quadruple. You can use n-fold, like a 2-fold increase, it doubled, or times, like it increased 6 times.
Lots of ways to avoid just saying the number over and over.
Exactly. And that links to the next point. Varying your language, especially with percentages, like in pie charts, why is that variation so important?
It just makes your writing much more sophisticated, less repetitive, shows off your vocabulary range. Instead of always saying the percentage of X was, you can switch it up.
How so? Give me some examples.
You could say a significant proportion of people, or over a quarter of respondents, or a small minority, or a substantial segment. You know, phrases like that.
Using synonyms for percentage or part.
Right. And you can convert percentages to approximate fractions around a third instead of 33%. Or use qualifiers. Just over 50%, approximately 60%, just under a quarter, nearly half, adds nuance and flow.
That's really useful for making the report sound less robotic. Okay, what about simple comparisons? The source mentions phrases for that.
Yeah, basic comparison tools. Phrases like compared to or compared with work well. Also in comparison to or in comparison with. They do a similar job.
And using while or whereas.
Very effective for showing contrasts within a single sentence. Category A increased while Category B decreased. It directly draws attention to the relationship between different data points.
Nice and concise. Then there's more specific language for comparing. What does that involve? This is about using set phrases to structure your comparisons. Things like, the chart compares X and Y in terms of the number of, or identifying extremes, category Z is by far the most significant. Or noting similarities. The figures for A and B tend to be fairly similar.
Any pitfalls here?
Yeah, the source warns against using ranking language like in first place or in second place if the visual isn't actually showing a competition. Don't force a ranking if it's not there.
Good point. What else is in this comparison toolkit?
Your standard comparatives and superlatives, of course, higher than the highest. Transition words are key too, however, in contrast, on the other hand. And those subordinating conjunctions we mentioned, whereas, while, although, they all help build comparative sentences.
Okay. The source also mentions adding an explanation, but stresses being concise. How do you add explanation without getting wordy?
One technique highlighted is reducing clauses to phrases. It sounds technical, but it's quite neat.
How does that work?
So instead of saying, the economy grew, which resulted in more jobs, you shorten it to, the economy grew, resulting in more jobs. It cuts out unnecessary words, but keeps the meaning. Helps you stay within the word count, too.
Clever. Okay, let's loop back to the structure again. Crafting a strong introduction and that general overview. What makes a good introduction for task 1?
A good intro immediately tells the reader what the visual is about. State the type of chart, the topic, location if there is one, and the time period. The simplest way is to paraphrase the question prompt they give you.
Any useful phrases to start with?
Yeah, the source gives examples like, the table shows changes in, or the bar chart compares, or the graph illustrates. And it suggests simple word swaps, like using percentage instead of proportion, or data instead of information. Just change it up a bit from the original question.
Got it. And the general overview paragraph, what absolutely needs to be in there?
The overview is your summary of the absolute main takeaways. Identify the biggest overall trends. Point out the highest and lowest figures if they're obvious and significant. Mention any major exceptions or overall patterns.
So it gives the examiner a quick snapshot of your understanding.
Exactly. A quick summary of the key message before you get bogged down in details. And remember, it can go after the intro or at the very end.
Right. Now, a really critical skill, selecting main points, especially with complex charts full of data. How do you decide what's actually important enough to write about?
That's a key challenge. You need to look for the big changes, the significant trends over the whole period shown. Look for the starting points and the ending points.
What else?
Look for the peaks and troughs, the highest and lowest values. Are there any really dramatic fluctuations? Or perhaps periods of stability? The key is identifying the most prominent features that tell the main story. Don't try to mention every little fluctuation.
Be selective again. Focus on the headlines, not the fine print.
Precisely. Avoid getting lost in minor details.
Okay, so once you've picked those main points, how do you write the body paragraphs effectively to convey them?
Right. The body paragraphs are where you elaborate on the trends you flagged in your overview. You need to provide the specific supporting details from the visual.
Some more numbers here.
Definitely. Aim for about 3 or 4 well-developed sentences in each of the 2 body paragraphs. Select the relevant data points, include the exact numbers or figures to back up what you're saying, and where it adds value, make those comparisons or maybe offer a brief explanation if it's obvious from the chart.
Adding that layer of analysis.
Exactly. It shows you're not just listing data, you're interpreting it.
The source even suggests a strategy of aiming for just 6 sentences for the details across those 2 paragraphs. What's the logic there?
Yeah, it's a kind of focusing technique. By aiming for roughly 3 sentences per detail paragraph, it forces you to be really concise and selective.
Prevents rambling.
It does. It makes you think. What are the absolute most important details I need to include? It encourages careful ordering of points and using linking words effectively to connect those few crucial sentences.
Okay, practical tip. Now, what if you have a lot of data, like several categories over many years? How do you select and group details then?
Good question. When faced with a lot of data, a good approach is to look at each subject or category shown. For each one, pick out the single most important or relevant point, maybe the overall trend, or the star 10 figures, or the peak.
So one key fact per category.
Kind of. Select the most noteworthy point for each, making sure to include the figure. Then group related points together. For instance, if you have data for product A, product B, and product C, you might have a sentence on the main trend for A, one for B, one for C, and group those into one paragraph about product performance.
Organizing by subject. Makes sense. Now, approximation. Sometimes you don't need the exact number or the chart isn't precise. What language can you use?
Using approximation language is really useful. Expressions like just over, almost, nearly, around, approximately, also well under or well over.
What about describing the amount?
You can use words like slight, moderate, substantial, remarkable to give a general sense. You can also use time approximations in the first half of the year or over the following 3 years. Prepositions like by and until can also suggest approximation around time or levels.
Useful for sounding natural and managing data overload. What about task 1 questions with more than one chart? How do you handle that?
Okay, multiple charts. The key is to address both. In your introduction, mention both charts.
Right.
Then, in the overview, summarize the main point or trend from each chart. And crucially, point out any obvious connections or contrasts between the charts.
So compare the charts at a high level first.
Exactly. Then, in the body paragraphs, you typically describe the first chart in detail in one paragraph and the second chart in detail in the next paragraph. Keep them distinct, but look for links.
Got it. What about describing processes? That seems quite different from charts.
It is quite different, yeah. The focus shifts completely to sequence. You're explaining the stages in order.
So sequencing words are key.
Absolutely vital. Words like firstly, secondly, then, next, after that, following this, and finally. You need to describe every distinct stage shown in the diagram.
Every single one.
Generally, yes. Describe each stage and connect it logically to the next, using those sequence words. Note if stages happen at the same time or if there are alternative steps.
And the grammar.
The source points out you'll mostly use the present simple tense and often the passive voice, like the mixture is heated, not someone heats the mixture.
Interesting. And no overview paragraph for processes.
Usually not. Just a clear introduction saying what the process is and then the body paragraphs detailing the steps in sequence.
Okay, different approach. And maps, what's the focus when describing a map?
Maps are all about location and change or comparison. You need to describe where things are in relation to each other.
Using directions.
Exactly. Language like to the left of, next to, opposite, north of, south of, behind, in front of. Task 1 maps often show how an area developed over time, or compare 2 different layouts. Your job is to describe those changes or differences using that locational language.
Highlighting what's new, what's gone, what's moved.
Precisely.
Okay, nearly there.
Yeah.
The source gives some tips on effective ways to prepare. Beyond just doing full practice essays, what helps?
Targeted practice can be really efficient. Spend time just looking at different types of Task 1 questions. Get familiar with bar charts, line graphs, pie charts, tables, processes, maps. Don't always write the whole thing.
Practice specific parts.
Yeah. Practice writing just introductions for 5 different charts.
Yeah.
Or practice writing just the overview paragraph for different visuals. Focus on specific skills.
And looking at good examples.
Definitely. The source strongly recommends studying model answers, ones that scored band 7 or higher. See how they structure things, the vocabulary they use, the grammar. Don't copy them, but learn from their techniques and adapt them.
Makes sense. Huh? Finally, let's quickly recap the common mistakes to avoid. What are the big pitfalls?
Okay, the don'ts. Don't just copy the question wording in your intro paraphrase.
Right.
Don't forget clear paragraphs. Examiners need to see that structure.
Crucial.
Don't forget a good, clear overview paragraph summarizing the main points. It's really important for the score.
Okay.
Don't just describe items separately. Compare them. That's a key part of the task.
Comparison again.
Yeah. Don't try to describe every single number. Be selective. Focus on the main points. And the big one.
Time.
Don't spend too long on task 1. Stick to that 20 minutes. Otherwise, you won't have enough time for task 2, which is worth more marks.
Such a critical point for the whole exam. Wow, okay. That feels like a really thorough breakdown of the key strategies from the source material.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground there. Structure, language, specific visual types, preparation, mistakes.
Absolutely. We've really dug deep into the structure, the crucial language, the common errors. Hopefully with a solid grasp of these things, listeners will feel much more confident tackling task 1.
We definitely encourage everyone listening to take some time, maybe reflect on the specific techniques, the vocabulary we talked about, and think, okay, how can I apply this to a bar chart? How would I use that for a process diagram?
Yeah. Actively think about applying it.
Hmm.
And maybe a final thought to leave people with. Nailing test 1 isn't just about your English level, is it?
Not at all. It's also hugely about being strategic, how you select information, how clearly you communicate it. It's about analysis and clear writing.
Skills that are useful way beyond just passing IELTS.
Absolutely. So definitely check out sample answers, practice applying these principles. It will pay off.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
If this tip helped you, give this stream a quick like so I know you're learning something valuable. If you're just joining, welcome. We've covered some key grammar so far, but don't worry, there's more to come. Like the EBU video, and if you're enjoying the stream, send it in the chat. This would be a good moment to take a screenshot or write this down. It could be the thing that gets you band 7+.
Okay, so you've sent over a whole bunch of really useful material on the IELTS listening test. And what we want to do now is kind of cut through the noise, right? Find the stuff that really matter.
Exactly. Get to the core of it.
So yeah, this deep dive is going to be laser focused on that listening test using Adam Smith's Tips for IELTS listening guide, plus all the other notes and advice you pulled together. And the mission, well, it's pretty simple. Pull out the most impactful strategies, the key info, so you can go into that test feeling, confident and knowing how to avoid the common slip-ups.
Okay, sounds good. Let's maybe start with the basics, like what actually makes this test tick. Because it's not just random audio clips thrown together.
No, definitely not. It's got a very specific structure.
Right. And understanding that structure, that gives you a real advantage, strategically speaking.
Totally. It's 4 sections, right?
Yep.
10 questions in each one.
Yep. 4 sections, 10 questions each.
But it's the way they're structured, the kind of content in each I think that's really interesting and tells you how to approach it.
Absolutely. What's kind of neat is how it eases you in. So sections 1 and 2,
Yeah.
they're all about everyday social situations, stuff we mostly all deal with.
Like what, specifically?
Well, section 1, it'll be a conversation, 2 people talking. Think about making travel plans, booking something, asking for information, that kind of back and forth.
Okay, relatable stuff.
Yeah. Then section 2 is just one person speaking, but still on a social topic. Maybe describing local facilities or giving information about an event. Still pretty accessible.
Right, so it's like they're, warming up your ears first with things you might actually hear day to day before they ramp it up.
Exactly. Because then comes sections 3 and 4, and these shift into educational or training settings.
More academic.
A bit more, yeah. Section 3 is usually a conversation, again, maybe up to 4 people. Often university students talking about an assignment, or maybe a student talking with a tutor. So the language gets a bit more complex.
Yeah.
And then section 4, that's the monologue. One person just giving an academic lecture.
Ah, the lecture part. People find that one tricky, right?
Often, yeah. That progression is really key because the listening skills you need, they kind of build as you go through the test.
And the big one, you only hear it once. No replays.
None. That definitely adds a layer of challenge.
Plus, you're dealing with different accents. British, Australian, New Zealander, North American. You've got to be ready for that mix.
It really tests your adaptability. It shows why just knowing individual words isn't, quite enough. You need to train your ear for different styles, different voices, and really focus during that single listen.
And it's not just listening, is it? There's the practical side, too.
Right. You get 30 minutes for the actual listening part. But then, crucially, you have that separate 10 minutes at the end just for transferring your answers over to the answer sheet.
Which, as the guide points out, is where being careful can really pay off. Don't want to lose points to sloppy handwriting or spelling mistakes after you've done the hard listening part.
Exactly. Every correct answer is 1 mark, and those marks build up to your final band score, those whole or half bands everyone's aiming for.
Okay, so that structure makes sense. It kind of naturally leads to the next big question. What are the absolute must-dos during the test? And just as important, what are the big no-nos, the things to definitely avoid?
Yeah, the guide is pretty clear on this. It gives a solid list of DOs.
Like what? What's top of the list?
First off, really listen to those short introductions before each section. They give you context. Super important for framing what you're about to hear.
Okay, don't tune out early.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Then use that reading time you get before each section starts. Use it wisely. Underline keywords in the questions.
Why why underlining doesn't really help?
It does. It's not just busy work. It primes your brain, helps you focus on what to listen for, helps filter out the extra noise when you're under pressure.
Makes sense.
And this one is non-negotiable. Read the instructions so carefully, especially word limits. No more than 2 words, or whatever it says. Ignore that, and you could get 0 marks even if your answer is technically right.
Ouch. Okay, word limits are critical. What else?
Write your answers down as you listen. Don't wait.
Why not wait until the end of a section?
Because your short-term memory, under test stress, it's not always your best friend. Things can vanish. Capturing the answer right when you hear it is much safer.
Yeah, trying to hold it all in your head, probably not ideal.
Not ideal at all. Also, as you're writing, just do a quick mental check. Does this answer actually make sense in the context?
Good point. And try to answer everything, even guesses.
Yes. Answer every question. You might have caught more than you think. And there's no penalty for guessing wrong, so leaving a blank is just leaving a potential mark on the table.
Okay, always guess if you have to, and then
Yeah.
use that 10-minute transfer time properly.
Absolutely. Write clearly. Double-check spelling. Check grammar, especially if it's sentence completion. Sloppy mistakes then can just undo all your good listening work.
Right. So those are the DOs. What about the don'ts? What should we actively avoid doing?
Well, first, don't waste time worrying about making your question booklet look neat. Crossing things out, changing your mind in the booklet while the audio is playing it just distracts you. Focus on the sound.
Okay, messy booklet is fine. Focus is key.
And crucially, don't panic if you miss a question. It happens. The absolute worst thing is letting it throw you off for the next few questions.
So what do you do if you miss one?
Just immediately look ahead to the next question. Try to find your place again in the audio. Keep moving forward.
Maintain momentum. Got it.
And here's a big one. Don't try to rephrase what you hear. If the answer is blue car, write blue car, not vehicle that was blue. Write the exact words or number.
Stick to the script, literally.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And again, watch limits like a hawk. Go over, even by one tiny word like a or the two, if it pushes you over the limit. And that's 0 marks for that answer.
Strict.
Oh, and don't just copy words that happen to be printed on the question paper onto the answer sheet unless they are also the answer you heard. They're testing your listening, not just your ability to spot words on the page.
Okay, that's a really clear set of do's and don'ts. So moving beyond those immediate actions, what about broader strategies, things that help overall?
Yeah, the guide starts with something quite empowering, I think. It says, listening isn't some magical gift you either have or don't. It's a skill.
Something you can learn and improve.
Exactly, which is great news. It suggests maybe you start overcoming any fear by just watching English TV or movies. The visuals help at first build confidence.
Makes it less intimidating.
Right. And then there's a really practical tip about actively training your ears. Sometimes spoken English just sounds like one long blur, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, especially faster speech or different accents.
So the guide suggests something interesting. Record yourself saying phrases on your phone, whatever. Then listen back repeatedly.
Even if you understand the phrase already.
Even then, it helps tune your ear to how those words actually sound when spoken naturally, maybe faster than you'd say them. It helps with recognition when you hear someone else. There's a big difference between seeing library written down and instantly catching it in fast speech.
Okay, actively training the ear, not just passively hearing. I like that.
Then there's the point about following instructions, which we touched on, but it's worth hammering home, especially word limits.
That fruit example was pretty stark, wasn't it? Write 4 fruits instead of 2, get 0 marks.
Exactly. It shows how vital it is. And remember, small words like a and they count. If the limit is 1 word, then a car is wrong. It has to be just car.
Wow. Okay. So meticulous attention to detail there. How do you stay focused during, say, a long lecture in section 4 without getting totally overwhelmed?
That's where the divide and conquer idea comes in. The recordings are usually broken up, maybe after 4 or 5 questions, with a little pause. Use that pause. Don't just sit there. Quickly read the next group of questions. Underline the key words for those ones. The guide even suggests drawing a line under the last question you just finished to sort of mentally fence off the next section.
So you're only thinking about the next few questions at a time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It stops your brain trying to juggle all 10 questions at once. Much more manageable chunks.
Smart. And what about distractions, like background noise or different accents?
You have to expect them. The test uses different voices, accents, sometimes background sounds like a cafe or an airport. The trick is to, well, acknowledge them, but train yourself not to get sidetracked. Focus purely on finding the answers.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It takes practice. But related to that focus, the guide suggests actively listening for specific types of information. Dates, times, phone numbers, places, transport.
Things that often come up as answers.
Very often. And a neat little tip. If you hear a number or a date, but you're not instantly sure which question it fits, just scribble it down quickly in the margin of your question paper.
Oh, okay, like a quick note to yourself.
Yeah. You can figure out where it fits later, during a pause, or during the transfer time. Better than losing it completely because you were trying to place it immediately.
That makes sense. And that reinforces the idea of answering as you listen, doesn't it? Don't wait.
Absolutely. Stress, foreign language processing, your immediate recall isn't always perfect. Get it down right away.
And if you do miss one, that keep moving forward mantra.
Crucial. The worst case is losing your place entirely. If you miss one, mentally shrug, look at the next question, listen for that. Don't dwell.
Are there clues in how things are said, like ways to spot an answer coming?
Sometimes, yes. The guide points out that answers are often spoken a bit louder or maybe more clearly than the surrounding speech.
Like emphasis.
Right. Or they might be repeated. Or spelled out, letter by letter. Or dictated as numbers, digit by digit. Practicing recognizing these little audio cues can definitely help.
Okay. And for questions that involve spelling names or places?
Practice. The guide specifically says practice spelling common city names, maybe some common first names or surnames, and numbers. It notes that double O is often used for 00 in phone numbers, for example. Using that list of examples in the material is a good way to self-test.
Got it. So knowing the structure, the do's and don'ts, and these general strategies, that's a solid base. What about the actual types of questions you'll face? Understanding those must help too.
Oh, definitely. Knowing the different task types means you're not surprised on the day. You know what's expected for each format.
So what are the main ones?
Well, you often get form completion, filling in gaps in, say, an application form, notes, summary, usually looking for factual details, names, addresses, dates, that sort of thing.
Word limits and using exact words from the recording being key there, presumably.
Always. Then there's multiple choice, classic ABC. Or maybe completing a sentence by choosing the right ending from 3 options. Sometimes it's trickier. They might ask you to choose, say, 2 answers from a longer list of 5 or 6 options.
Yeah.
So reading the instructions on how many to choose is vital.
Right. Don't just assume it's always one answer.
Never assume. Then, short answer questions. Pretty straightforward. You hear a question, you write a short answer. Again, watch the word limit. Tests pinpointing specific info.
Okay.
Sentence completion is similar to gap fill, but the gaps are within full sentences that summarize parts of the recording. Word limits, grammar, all important.
Time matching.
Matching tasks, yeah. You might have a list of, say, people or places mentioned, and you have to match them to a list of options like opinions or features. Test understanding relationships between ideas.
And classification is similar.
Sort of, yeah. Grouping things into categories based on what you hear.
Okay. One more. The visual ones.
Right. Plan, map, or diagram labeling. You see a picture, like a map of a campus or a diagram of a device, and you have to fill in labels based on the description you hear.
Do you choose from a list for those or use words from the recording?
Could be either. Sometimes there's a box of answers to choose from. Other times you need to pull the words directly from the audio. Instructions and word limits rule, as always.
So quite a variety of tasks. They're really testing listening in different ways.
Exactly. From catching tiny details to understanding the main points, following arguments, making connections. It's comprehensive.
Okay, so knowing those types helps. Now, what about strategies for those specific types? Like any killer tips for multiple choice, for example?
Yeah, for multiple choice, a really good technique is to treat each option A, B, and C like a mini true, false, not given question. As you listen, think. Does the audio support option A? Yes. True. No. False. Or does it not mention it? Not given.
So you actively evaluate each one against the sound.
Exactly. It helps you eliminate the wrong ones more systematically instead of just grabbing the first one that sounds plausible.
Clever. What about the gap fill tasks? Form completion, sentence completion.
Look closely at the words around the gap, before and after. They give you huge clues about the grammar. Are you listening for a noun, a verb, an adjective, maybe a date? Predicting the type of word helps you tune in.
Makes sense. Using the grammar to help you listen.
Definitely. And be ready for what the guide calls chameleon questions.
Chameleon, meaning they change color.
Sort of. It means the recording probably won't use the exact same words as the question or the options. It'll use synonyms, paraphrasing.
Ah, different ways of saying the same thing.
Precisely. Like the question might say compulsory, but the speaker says you have to or it's required.
Yeah.
You need to be listening for the meaning, not just matching identical words. Recognizing paraphrasing is a massive skill here.
Okay, expect synonyms. Good tip.
Hmm.
And you mentioned traps earlier. What kind of traps should people watch out for?
Well, a common one is the unexpected turn. A speaker might say they'll do something on Monday. Oh, wait, no, actually, Wednesday is better.
So the last thing they say is usually the answer.
Often, yes. The last word counts is a good rule of thumb. Listen right to the end of their thought. Another trap is generalizations. A speaker lists specifics, swimming, hiking, camping, then sums it up as outdoor activities. If the question asks for the general category, you need outdoor activities, not just one example.
Gotcha. Listen for the level of detail the question needs.
Right. Also, be super wary of answers with absolute words like all, never, always, no exceptions. Often the recording will have a little qualifier like most students or usually, which makes the absolute answer wrong.
Okay, watch out for those absolutes. What about grammar in answers?
Super important, especially in gap fills and sentence completion. If your answer makes the sentence grammatically wrong, it's marked wrong. Even if the word itself seems right contextually. Check your plurals, verb tenses, etc. when you transfer.
And using the time between sections. We talked about reading ahead.
Yes. The guides strongly suggest prioritizing reading ahead for the next section over checking the answers you just wrote for the previous one. Those few seconds are golden for preparation. Get your head into the next set of questions.
Okay, look forward, not back, during those mini breaks. And when transferring answers, any tips beyond writing clearly?
Be efficient. Just the letter A, B, C for multiple choice. The word or phrase for completions. Don't copy the whole sentence. And like we said, if you totally missed one, guess. Don't leave blanks.
And the ultimate strategy.
Practice, practice, practice. Using official materials, timed conditions. There's no substitute for actually doing it.
Okay, let's maybe circle back and reinforce some of those really core general tips, the ones that apply across the board. They seem so foundational.
Good idea. They bear repeating. So, number one, you only hear it once. Write answers as you listen. Don't wait.
Number 2.
Listen to the introductions. Context is king.
3.
Use reading time well. Underline keywords. Predict answer types.
4.
Questions follow the order of the recording. That helps you stay on track.
5.
Don't panic if you miss one. Move on immediately. Focus ahead.
6.
Transfer answers clearly. No extra words. Check spelling grammar.
7.
Think synonyms. Don't expect exact word matching. Listen for meaning.
And 8.
Pay attention to intonation. How speakers say things can give clues.
That's a great checklist. Now, when people do use practice tests, how should they approach them for maximum benefit? It's not just about the score, is it?
Not at all. The score is secondary, really. The real value is in the analysis afterwards.
Right.
What did you learn? Any new words? What sections were tough? And why? Did any tricks catch you out?
So reviewing mistakes is key.
Absolutely. And be tough on yourself in practice with spelling and grammar. Get into the habit of moving on if you miss an answer. Simulate test conditions. And maybe use that checking time they give you at the end of a section to glance ahead at the next section's questions rather than just checking backwards.
Okay, active learning from the practice, not just passive testing. What about those short pauses during the test? You mentioned reading ahead.
Yeah, the guide is quite strong on this, that some time you're given is really meant for reading the next set of questions. It even suggests kind of ignoring the instruction to check the previous section and just using every second to prepare for what's coming.
Interesting. Prioritize preparation over review in those moments. Now, spelling, you've mentioned it a few times. Why is it so critical? Seems harsh to lose marks for a small typo.
It might seem harsh, but yeah, it's critical. The guide says lots of people lose marks this way. Plurals are a big one. If the answer needs to be plural, like reasons, and you write reason, that's often marked wrong.
So missing the I's can cost you the point.
It definitely can if the grammar demands it. The best strategy isn't trying to memorize rules, but making a personal list of words you misspell in practice, and just learning those specific words. Use a dictionary app to check as you study.
Okay, targeted spelling practice based on your own errors. Makes sense. Now, the dreaded section 4. Why is it considered the hardest, usually?
Several reasons. There's no break in the middle, unlike the other sections. It's one long monologue.
Just one speaker the whole time.
Yep. The language is usually more academic, more complex vocabulary, and the pace can feel faster.
So what's the advice? Just brace yourself.
Kind of, but also don't obsess over it, especially early on. Focus on nailing sections 1, 2, and 3 first. Get as many marks there as possible. The guide even gives some rough targets, like maybe aiming for 10 in section 1, 8 in section 2, 7 in section 3, meaning you might only need 5 or so in section 4 for band 7 overall.
So don't let section 4 psych you out too much. Focus on the points you can get more easily elsewhere.
Exactly. Build a strong base first.
Okay. What about more tips specifically for multiple choice? Beyond the true, false, not given idea.
Definitely read the question and all the choices before the audio starts. Then underline the key words in each choice, the words that really differentiate option A from B from C.
Focus on the differences between the options.
Yes. Then, as you listen, you're zoning in on those specific distinguishing words, or their paraphrases. Expect to hear distractors. Maybe words from options B and C are mentioned, but only option A actually answers the specific question asked.
So listen for the answer, not just words from the options.
Precisely. And if you're stuck, guess and move on. Don't burn time agonizing.
Finding those keywords, both in the question and the audio, seems absolutely fundamental, but they might not be the same words.
Exactly. That's the synonym paraphrasing challenge again. Don't listen for the exact word from the question. Listen for the idea. The guide uses an example about a course schedule. The question might use one term, the recording another, but they mean the same day or activity. You have to make that connection.
Okay. The guide also boiled things down to a top 8 tips list. Can we run through those quickly? A final checklist.
Sure. Top 8. 1. Concentrate. Simple but vital. 2. Read ahead. Use those breaks. 3. Predict the word types needed for gaps. 4. Keep the next question in mind. 5. Expect tricks or distractors. 6. Know the exam format inside out. 7. Spelling is key. 8. Don't stress too much about the hardest questions. Focus on overall score.
That's a solid summary. And recognizing synonyms and their opposites seems like a skill that underlies many of these tips.
It's huge. You just won't hear the exact same words all the time. Difficult might become too hard or not easy. Boring needs to be more active. Knowing these equivalents is essential. Same for opposites, it helps eliminate wrong answers. How can people train themselves to be more careful to avoid those silly mistakes? Pay attention to nuance. Nearly everyone is not everyone. Be precise. If the answer is early afternoon, don't just write afternoon. Capture that detail if you hear it and it fits the word limit.
Little details matter. The guide also lists common problems students face. What are they, and what's the overall solution?
The main problems are only hearing it once, the importance of spelling, the different accents, and the fact that some questions are designed to trick you.
Sounds daunting.
It can be, but the solution boils down to practice. Lots of listening practice, lots of spelling practice. But crucially, the guide stresses that general listening practice, just listening to lots of English, like podcasts, news, songs, is actually more valuable than only doing exam techniques. Develop a really good ear.
Build the underlying skill, not just the test tricks.
Exactly.
Okay, just to be crystal clear on capitals and plurals again.
Lowercase for names and places is usually fine. Capitalization mistakes really cost marks. But the plurals is. Missing that can definitely cost you if the grammar needs it. Context is everything.
Got it. Now, there were some quick, actionable tips for during the listening. What were those again?
Right, things to listen for. Repeated words often signal main ideas. Changes in the speaker's voice pitch, tone can highlight important info or emotion. Pay attention to specific adjectives, numbers, colors, sizes. Try to interpret why someone is saying something, the underlying meaning.
Look for implied meaning.
Yeah, sometimes the answer isn't stated directly. Think about the example of the presentation deadline. The response might imply the answer without stating it. And using scratch paper for quick note speaker names, key adjectives can help. But don't get so lost in note-taking that you miss the audio. Shorthand helps there.
The guide also compiled tips from 20 examiners. Any recurring themes there?
Oh yeah. Practice both monologues and dialogues. Spelling, spelling, spelling. Keep a notebook of errors. Use breaks to rate ahead and predict. Transfer answers meticulously. Capitals for names, places recommended. Stick to word limits rigidly. Get used to diverse accents.
Sounds familiar.
Exactly. Practice past papers under exam conditions and analyze mistakes thoroughly. General English listening is crucial. Make it a daily habit. Aim for perfection in Part 1. Beware of info changing mid-speech. Practice listening only once. Use all caps if your handwriting is messy. Bring an eraser. Remember, it tests more than just listening, vocab, grammar, etc. Write on the question paper first. Practice shorthand. Concentrate. Guess, don't leave blanks. Use the initial context info. It's a very consistent message.
Very consistent. Okay, there was also a point about not overdoing practice tests, the 90-10 rule.
Right. The anecdote about the student burning out on past papers, the advice is roughly 10% of your time on actual timed IELTS tests and 90% on general real-world listening practice, like 20, 30 minutes of a podcast or news daily. It's often more effective for building real skill.
And the guide broke listening down into 6 simpler skills.
Yeah, useful way to think about it. 1, prediction, guessing answers. 2, synonyms and paraphrasing, expecting different words. 3, connected speech, understanding linked words. 4, signposting language, recognizing structure words like firstly, finally. 5, listening to 2 people, tracking agreement, disagreement. 6, note-taking, summarizing key points.
And being an active listener, not passive.
Huge difference. Passive is just hearing background noise. Active is engaging your brain, setting tasks, like in the exam. Even 20 minutes of active listening beats hours of passive.
How do you practice that tricky connected speech?
Micro-listening. Use a podcast. Pause short, difficult chunks. Replay over and over until you can pick out the link words. Did you becomes did you, wanna becomes wanna. Train your ear for those connections.
And for listening to 2 people.
Focus on agreement versus disagreement. Try to paraphrase their points. If one is giving instructions, imagine you're the one receiving them. What details would you note down?
And note-taking itself.
Practice with online lectures. Develop your own shorthand symbols, abbreviations. Focus on key points, not every word. Then check the spelling of your notes afterwards.
Podcasts seem highly recommended throughout.
Definitely. Real English, interesting topics, variety of accents. Great for active listening practice. Guess new words, note them, check meanings, rewind for connected speech, even imitate pronunciation.
Okay, now the slightly controversial point. Do you really need a teacher for listening prep?
The guide suggests, maybe not specifically for listening technique itself. The key technique is just reading ahead. Beyond that, it's mostly about practice, analyzing your own mistakes, and using good resources like the Cambridge books.
And how best to use those Cambridge books?
Focus on specific sections you find hard. Listen multiple times in practice to understand errors. Give yourself unlimited break time sometimes, just to focus purely on the listening skill. And use the transcripts. Read them to see if your problem is hearing or vocabulary.
What about transcribing? Writing everything down?
It's hard work, but the guide says it pays off massively. Forces you to hear every single word. Really intensive practice.
For building confidence, the guide recommends mastering Part 1 first.
Yeah, aim for 10-10 consistently on Part 1 tasks from the Cambridge books before worrying too much about Sections 3 and 4. Get that foundation solid.
And roughly, what scores are needed for bands 6, 7, 8?
The guide gives approximate numbers, bearing in mind tests vary. Band 6 might be around 23 out of 40, Band 7 around 30, Band 8 around 35. Gives you a target.
Okay, finally, there was that big list of FAQs. Any key ones we should highlight again?
Maybe just reinforce the really common ones. Word limits for absolute, spelling counts, UK, US is fine, names might be spelled out for you. Questions follow the recording order. You only hear it once. Use the breaks to read ahead, especially before Section 4. Transfer answers carefully in the last 10 minutes. Guess if needed. Plurals and basic grammar matter.
Phew, that's a lot of ground covered. So, wrapping it all up, it really sounds like success comes down to, well, a mix of things. Understanding the test structure, definitely.
Knowing the rules.
Using those key strategies, reading ahead, predicting, listening actively for meaning and synonyms, not just words.
Right. And managing your time, especially in those breaks and the final transfer period.
Being super careful about instructions, word limits, spelling, grammar.
Those details can make or break your score.
And just consistent, focused practice, not just doing tests, but learning from them and building that general good ear with real-world listening.
Exactly. It's a combination of test technique and genuine listening skill improvement.
So hopefully you now feel like you have a really solid grasp of the core ideas and tactics to approach the IELTS listening test, drawn right from all that material you gathered.
Yeah, it's all there, a comprehensive toolkit.
So maybe think about which of these strategies really jumped out at you, which ones feel like they'd fit your learning style, and what areas maybe feel like your biggest challenge right now.
Good questions to reflect on.
Perhaps focusing on different accents using podcasts, or maybe even trying that transcribing technique for a particularly tricky section. That could be a really productive next step.
Yeah, find what works for you and target your practice.
Absolutely. Remember, that consistent, focused effort is really what builds the skill and the confidence you need. You can definitely do this.
If this live helped you, the best way to say thank you is to hit the like button, share this stream, and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of smart, motivated English learners, and you're now part of it. And remember, your English doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be clear, confident, and real. Good luck in your exam, and see you in the next one.